Imagine, just for a moment, the absolute apex of the corporate world.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So you are sitting at the top of a mountain that you've literally spent decades climbing. You're holding like 7 patents in your name.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you have 2 master's degrees hanging on the wall of your massive corner office.
Naturally.
You manage this highly visible global team of absolute all-stars, and they just hang on your every single word.
So you're a big deal.
Exactly. You are earning the highest stock awards at a Fortune 100 Titan. In fact, you've earned the Chairman's Award twice.
Which is, I mean, that's incredibly rare.
Oh, a feat literally nobody else in the history of the company has ever achieved.
That is
Your
wild.
daily professional life is just this absolute exhilarating frenzy. We are talking hundreds of emails a day, constant conference calls from every corner of the globe.
A literal jet stream of opportunity.
Yes, a jet stream of influence. You are the top 1% on the organizational chart. By all traditional metrics, societal standards, you are a very big deal.
Right. I mean, it's just an incredibly intoxicating place to be. You have reached this level where your mere presence commands immediate respect and action.
Exactly. But then you decide to leave.
Okay.
You step away from the corporate behemoth because you want to start your own business. You hand in your badge. And on the morning of day 1 as a solo entrepreneur, the frenzy just stops.
Absolute silence.
Completely. No emails, no urgent calls, no glamorous strategic meetings in Paris. You wake up, you sit at your kitchen table, and you realize something absolutely terrifying.
That you're not the go-to person anymore.
You have become the go-to person for absolutely nothing.
It's a profound psychological shock, honestly.
It has to be.
Because you step out of that roaring current of institutional momentum and you find yourself in a stagnant pond. And it forces a very uncomfortable realization about where your perceived power actually came from.
And that is the exact tension we are exploring in this deep dive. I want you, listening right now, to really think about this scenario.
Yeah, it's a tough question to ask yourself.
If you were to strip away your company name from your email signature, right? And you erased your job title from your LinkedIn profile, what exactly is left of your professional power?
Do people return your calls because of who you are
Or because of the logo on your business card?
Exactly. So today we are unpacking a massive fundamental shift in how authority works today. We are looking at the introductory chapter, specifically pages 7 through 13, of Mark Schaefer's work on the equity of influence. Yeah. It's all about that transition from institutional power to individual authority in the digital age.
You're going to learn why all those traditional markers of success, the degrees, the titles, the corner offices we've all been taught to endlessly chase, why they just don't guarantee your relevance in the modern economy anymore.
They really don't.
And more importantly, we're going to dissect why strategically becoming known is the absolute most critical, non-negotiable asset for anyone looking to build a business, launch a new career, or make any kind of lasting impact today.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It truly is. And to understand this shift, we have to start by examining that terrifying silence we just described on day 1 of entrepreneurship.
The author calls this the veil of silence.
Let's really dig into this veil of silence because the transition from being a high-flying global director of e-business to day 1 of sitting alone in a home office is just fascinating to me.
It's a brutal reality check.
We're talking about someone who was the undisputed internet go-to guy at a Fortune 100 Titan. He sneezed and a global team handed him a tissue.
Right, yeah.
And then crickets. Absolute deafening silence.
Yeah.
How does someone who is objectively that talented, that accomplished, just fall off the map overnight?
Well, it really comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of gravity.
Gravity?
Yeah, so think about physics. Massive objects have their own gravity. In the corporate world, massive institutions have their own gravity.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The psychological whiplash happens because highly successful professionals naturally assume that the reputation they enjoy is entirely their own creation. They assume the gravity belongs to them.
They think they're the planet, not the moon.
Exactly. They were respected, they were well known within the sprawling ecosystem of their company, and they naturally assumed that this localized fame would just, automatically travel with them into the outside world.
But the silence proved otherwise.
Yeah, the silence was the brutal proof that nobody in the outside world actually knew or cared that he was a very big deal just 24 hours prior.
Wow.
His reputation, his power, his influence, it was almost entirely confined to the literal and figurative walls of his previous employer.
There is a story in our source material that illustrates this so perfectly, and I want to spend some time on it. It's about a guy named Cesar Paz.
Ah, yes, the Brazilian entrepreneur.
Right. Now, Cesar is a leading digital innovator and entrepreneur down in Brazil. But before he went out on his own, he worked for Embraer.
And Embraer is
For
massive.
those who don't know, yeah, Embraer is a huge aerospace conglomerate. They build jets. They are a literal titan of industry.
So he had a lot of weight behind his name.
Exactly. And Caesar explained that when he left this massive corporate machine to start his own venture, it felt as though he had literally lost his last name.
That is such a haunting phrase, losing your last name,
Right. He used to be known everywhere as Caesar from Embraer.
which is a powerful title.
When Caesar from Embraer called you, you picked up the phone on the first ring because Embraer has massive budgets, massive influence, and massive prestige.
Of course you pick up.
But once he left, he was just Caesar. And he realized that nobody cared who just Caesar was. He had to build his entire professional identity and brand all over again from absolute scratch.
What Caesar experienced is the bursting of the illusion of institutional power.
The illusion. I like that.
Professionals, especially those who are highly competent, driven, and successful, often confuse a platform's institutional gravity with their own personal gravity.
So they mix up the company's power with their own.
Exactly. When you are Caesar from Embraer, a massive percentage of the respect you receive, the swiftly returned phone calls, the immediate trust people place in you in a meeting, that is actually borrowed equity.
Borrowed equity.
Yes, you are renting it from Embraer. It is not yours to keep.
I keep picturing it like a superhero cape.
Okay, I love a good analogy. Let's hear it.
So you put on this magnificent cape, right? And suddenly you can fly, you have super strength, everyone looks up to you in absolute awe.
You feel invincible.
And you start to think, wow, I am incredibly powerful. But then you quit the Justice League.
Naturally.
You take off the cape, you jump off a building expecting to fly, and you just fall flat on your face on the pavement.
Ouch.
You realize, in a very painful way, that the superpowers belong to the cape, not to the person wearing it.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. The corporate entity is the cape.
Yeah.
And we have to understand why losing that cape is so uniquely devastating for high achievers.
Because their ego is so tied up in it.
Exactly. Highly successful people usually identify very, very closely with their professional achievements. It becomes the absolute core of their identity.
They're the ones working the crazy hours.
Right. They are the ones putting in the 80-hour weeks. They are the ones filing the patents. They are the ones managing the complex global teams and putting out the daily fires.
So they feel like they earn that respect.
Completely. So when they step outside the company, it feels deeply personally unfair to them when they realize the free market does not naturally separate their individual hard work from the corporate logo that used to be on their business card.
It's a total ego death. And the source material doesn't shy away from how humbling this is.
Not at all.
The author experiences this hard reset firsthand. He goes from those glamorous, high-stakes strategic meetings in Paris, living the life of a corporate titan, to his very first professional speaking engagement as an independent consultant.
And this is quite the venue, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a massive step down. He's speaking in front of a small gathering at the Lions Club in Farragut, Tennessee.
The contrast is staggering, from Parisian boardrooms to a community hall in Tennessee.
Though, to be fair, he does make a point to note that the fried chicken served at the Lions Club lunch was absolutely delicious.
Say, you have to find the silver linings, right?
Exactly. But still, the drop in prestige is massive.
It's the ultimate reality check. I mean, when he started out on his own, his first 2 consulting customers weren't Fortune 500 global brands begging for his genius.
Who were they?
They were a local college kid trying to scrape together a catering business and a local real estate agent.
Wow. Talk about a reset.
He had gone from the absolute pinnacle of the corporate mountain back down to the absolute starting line at base camp.
So if you are listening to this right now, maybe on your commute or while you're walking your dog, I really want you to internalize this reality.
It's important.
We are all deeply susceptible to this illusion. You have to recognize that your current job title, no matter how impressive it sounds, is rented. It is not owned.
Rented, not owned. That's the key takeaway here.
If you are relying entirely on that rented title to open doors for you, you are highly vulnerable to the veil of silence.
Think about what happens if your company gets acquired tomorrow.
Right, or goes bankrupt. Or if you simply burn out and decide to walk away, what equity do you actually take with you?
Nothing, if you haven't built it yourself.
You must actively work, while you are still employed, to build a portable professional identity. An identity that survives and thrives regardless of what corporate logo happens to be paying your salary this year.
And that realization that your institutional power is an illusion leads us directly into the heart of how the rules of influence have fundamentally, irreversibly changed.
The shift from offline to online.
Exactly. We have
Yeah.
to look at the sharp contrast between the legacy, offline symbols of personal power and the new reality dictated by the digital age.
Let's break down those old rules because it's what most of us were raised to believe in.
It's the traditional corporate playbook.
The offline symbols of influence are everywhere in the corporate world. It's your job title. Are you a director, a VP, a C-suite executive?
It's your salary bracket.
Yes, it's the sheer number of direct reports you manage. We're conditioned to look for the framed degrees from prestigious universities displayed conspicuously on the office wall.
It's your control over scarce resources, your access to exclusive executive relationships.
The source material even points out that sociological studies prove things like how tall you are, how conventionally attractive you are, and the bespoke tailoring of your suit directly contribute to your perceived personal power in the offline world.
These are the legacy markers of authority. And to be fair, for decades, for centuries even, this was the unquestioned currency of influence.
It worked for a long time.
You walk into a physical room, you inhabit the corner office with the panoramic view, you wear the expensive tailored suit, the Ivy League diploma is perfectly positioned behind your mahogany desk. All of these physical, offline elements instantly signal to anyone walking in that you hold power.
It's an immediate, visceral establishment of dominance and authority.
Exactly. But here is where the source material drops a bomb.
A big one.
It makes a very bold, very absolute claim. It states that on the internet, in the digital economy, none of this matters.
Okay, wait, none of it.
According to the text, no. Nobody knows or cares what your corporate title is. An algorithm cannot tell how tall you are, how wealthy your family is, or what exclusive country club you belong to.
That makes sense algorithmically, sure.
The argument is that there is now only one true source of power and influence when it comes to the online world, and that is simply to be known.
Okay, I have to jump in here and aggressively push back on this because that sounds a bit too utopian.
Like utopian, how so?
I struggle to believe it's that black and white. Are we really honestly saying that a Harvard MBA or a corner office at Goldman Sachs means absolutely nothing on the internet?
The text argues it doesn't give you automatic power.
Come on. Don't those offline degrees, those massive corporate achievements give you a massive, unfair head start online?
In what way?
If the CEO of a major international bank starts a blog or a podcast today, surely they have an immediate advantage over a 22-year-old college student starting a blog in their dorm room, right? The CEO is going to get instant followers just based on their offline status.
That is a very fair critique, and it's a vital distinction we need to parse out carefully.
Right, because I just don't buy that it's a completely level playing field.
Well, the argument is not that education, deep experience, or offline achievements are somehow intrinsically worthless now. Of course they have value.
Okay.
The argument is that those offline symbols do not automatically or sustainably translate into digital influence.
Walk me through that. Because if a famous CEO joins Twitter, they get 50,000 followers on day one.
They might get a spike in curiosity on day one, but digital influence is an entirely different ecosystem with different physics. Let's look at the mechanism.
Okay, let's look at the mechanisms.
A framed Ivy League diploma on your wall does not algorithmically rank your content on Google's first page.
True. Google can't read the diploma on the wall.
A corner office does not automatically generate the emotional resonance required to build a loyal, active community on social media. Your height or your expensive suit cannot engage an audience through a 60-minute podcast episode.
Unless it's a video podcast about tailoring, maybe.
Fair point.
Yeah.
But generally, the college student in the dorm room who consistently publishes highly valuable, deeply researched, engaging content every single week for 2 years will absolutely eclipse the bank CEO who posts a boring corporate press release once a month.
Regardless of the CEO's offline pedigree.
Exactly. The pedigree alone isn't enough to sustain digital attention.
Okay. I see the nuance now. It's not that the achievements themselves are useless. It's that the internet demands a completely different currency to maintain attention.
Precisely. You have to earn the attention.
You can't just flash your Harvard badge, demand respect, and expect the internet to bow down and blindly consume your content. The internet asks, what have you done for me lately?
Yes. The internet is a brutally meritocratic attention economy, and this introduces the concept of influence as a new form of equity.
Equity. like in finance.
Think about equity in a financial sense. It's ownership, it's an asset you build over time, deposit by deposit, investment by investment.
Oh, I like that framework.
Digital influence works the exact same way. The internet is the ultimate equalizer because influence must be actively accumulated through visible, consistent value delivery.
You can't just inherit it.
You cannot inherit digital influence. You have to earn the attention, the respect, and the trust of an online audience from the ground up, day by day, regardless of how many offline laurels you are resting on.
That is such a vital mental shift. So if you are listening to this and you are contemplating entering the digital space to build your personal brand or launch a business, you have to leave your ego at the door.
The ego is your biggest obstacle here.
Stop relying on your past offline laurels to do your online heavy lifting. You cannot coast on the fact that you're a senior vice president somewhere, that you have a fancy degree.
Nobody online cares.
You have to start treating your digital influence as a distinct, separate equity. It is a completely independent asset that you must deliberately build, nurture, and grow on its own terms through the consistent value you provide to others online.
And that realization leads us to a very crucial, very subtle distinction in this new digital landscape.
What's that?
What does it actually mean to build this equity? What does it truly mean to be known? Because it is incredibly easy and incredibly dangerous to confuse being known with being famous.
Yes, this is where so many people get derailed. The source material is very careful to aggressively demystify this goal.
It's an important distinction.
It explicitly states that being known is absolutely not about having millions of followers on Instagram. It's not about red carpet appearances or trying to engineer some viral stunt on TikTok or getting paparazzi to follow you.
That's fame, and fame is exhausting.
Being known is highly specific. It is about having the proper authority, the right reputation, and a targeted audience to realize your specific potential and achieve your personal goals.
What's fascinating to me here is the sheer functional utility of being known versus the vanity of being famous.
Functional utility. Explain that.
Fame is broad, shallow, and often entirely superficial. People might know your face, but they don't necessarily trust your expertise or buy your products. Being known, on the other hand, is narrow, deep, and fiercely purposeful.
Let's bring in a real-world example from the deep dive, because this is where the concept gets really tangible.
Yeah, Elisa Meredith's story is great for this.
Exactly. So there is a story about a woman named Elisa Meredith. She's an independent marketing professional.
Right.
She reached out to the author and sent this wonderful, honest note. She basically said, I want to be known, but it's not about being famous. I don't want to be an influencer. I'd rather just make a good living quietly.
Which is what most people actually want, right?
Yes. And then she admitted something that I think a lot of us can relate to. She said she is a truly horrible salesperson.
I think a lot of independent contractors feel that way.
Oh, absolutely. She hates the friction of selling. Her entire strategy is that if she can become known in her specific niche, it will naturally become much easier to connect with the exact type of new customers she actually wants to work with without ever having to do a hard sell.
Elisa's story perfectly encapsulates the profound economic efficiency of being known.
Economic efficiency. I like how you phrase that.
For an independent professional, a freelancer, or an entrepreneur who actively dislikes the awkward friction and rejection of traditional sales, being known essentially does all the heavy lifting for you.
It removes the cold calling.
Completely. When you are known in your specific narrow niche, the trust precedes you into the room.
That is huge. The trust precedes you.
Yes. Think about a traditional sales interaction. You walk into a room or jump on a Zoom call, and you have to spend the first 30 minutes manually selling yourself.
This is the worst part. Here's my resume. Here's why I'm great.
Right. You have to prove your credibility, recite your resume, defend your track record, and overcome the client's inherent skepticism. But when you are known, you don't have to do any of that.
Because they've already consumed your content.
Exactly. The articles you've written, the podcasts you've hosted, the valuable content you've consistently put out into the world, that body of work has already done the convincing.
So they feel like they already know you.
The client is already sold on your expertise before you even say hello.
The source also cites a massive corporate example of this, which proves it's not just for solo freelancers. It talks about how IBM approaches digital influence.
Oh, the IBM example is brilliant.
IBM actively encourages its army of scientists and engineers to blog, to create videos, to build personal digital footprints. Now, why would a massive traditional corporation want its employees building their own personal brands?
Usually companies are terrified of that.
Right. because they're afraid the employee will leave. But IBM realizes that when these scientists eventually walk into a high-stakes sales meeting with a potential client, they aren't walking in as anonymous corporate cogs.
They're walking in as recognized experts.
Yes, who already have passionate fans who have consumed their insightful content for months. They have instant, unshakable credibility. They have, as the text brilliantly puts it, essentially pre-populated the sales relationship.
Pre-populated the sales relationship. That phrase alone represents the core economic value of the equity of influence. It completely removes the friction, the doubt, and the skepticism of anonymity.
It makes me think of the difference between a global pop star and a neighborhood specialist doctor.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Break that down.
The pop star is famous. They are playing sold-out stadiums. They have 50 million followers. Their faces on billboards. But a highly respected, heavily booked orthopedic surgeon in your city, that doctor is known.
And they don't need 50 million followers to be successful.
The doctor doesn't have 50 million followers. The doctor doesn't want millions of followers. They just need the 500 people in their community who have severe knee problems to know exactly who they are, to respect their surgical authority, and to trust them implicitly.
The pop star requires mass appeal and sheer volume to survive.
But the specialist doctor only needs targeted, unshakable authority within a very specific ecosystem.
That is a perfect, precise analogy. The metric of success for the pop star is sheer volume and visibility. The metric of success for the specialist doctor, and for anyone trying to build the equity of influence, is the quality, the depth, and the relevance of their reputation within a highly specific target market.
So think about your own end game right now. You need to define exactly who needs to know you in order for you to achieve your specific professional goals.
Right, you have to be intentional.
What are you actually trying to accomplish? Are you trying to get appointed to a prestigious corporate board? Are you trying to attract major donors for a nonprofit charity? Are you trying to sell a $500 digital course online? Or maybe earn a tenured university teaching position?
Those all require very different audiences.
Exactly. You categorically do not need 1 million followers to achieve any of those things. 1 million followers might actually be a massive distraction.
Dealing with trolls and noise.
You just need the right followers. You need the specific influential people who can actually activate those goals to know who you are and trust your expertise.
Exactly. But once you have defined that specific target audience, you face the next inevitably difficult question. How do you actually attract them?
That's the million-dollar question.
How do you build that bridge? And this brings us to a section of the deep dive that aggressively challenges a lot of the modern feel-good self-help advice that saturates our culture today.
Oh, I was waiting for this part. This is the concept that passion without a plan is just a hobby.
Yes, the hobby trap.
The author points out a staggering statistic. If you go on Amazon right now and search for books on personal branding, there are literally more than 3,000 titles.
It's an incredibly crowded space.
And he observes that the vast majority of the self-help advice in this space is remarkably shallow. It usually starts and stops with one very cliché phrase: discover your passion.
Follow your bliss.
Yes. The source material firmly, almost ruthlessly, rejects this intoxicating Disney-fied mythology of if you can dream it, you can be it.
And it is vital that we unpack why the author is so highly critical of this culturally beloved approach.
He's not saying passion is bad, right?
No, he isn't saying passion is bad, but he is saying that an approach based solely on passion completely lacks strategic architecture.
It's missing the foundation.
Exactly. The text argues that identifying your passion, understanding your unique strengths, yes, that is important. But that is merely the starting line of the marathon. It is absolutely not the finish line.
The text highlights a business coach named Dana Hitt Sanchez to hammer this point home.
She's seen the reality of this firsthand.
She works directly with small business owners, people who are in the trenches trying to make a living. And she says she sees an agonizing number of these entrepreneurs crash, burn, and lose their life savings because they try to run a business on passion without a concrete plan.
It's heartbreaking, really.
It is. She points out a very uncomfortable truth. A passion, or a hobby, is entirely about you.
It's internally focused.
Yes, it is an activity that gives you internal pleasure. You love knitting, you love playing guitar, you love analyzing vintage movies. That's great.
But who's buying it?
Right. But, as she says, just concentrating on a hobby doesn't necessarily answer a market need. She warns heavily against the field of dreams, if I build it, they will come mentality.
Because they usually don't come.
She points out that just because you deeply love doing something, it does not mean anyone else on earth will care, or, more importantly, pay you for it.
This connects to the broader, often brutal reality of entrepreneurship. The author urges us to start thinking of our personal brand not as an art project, but as a startup, the startup of you.
The startup of you. I love that framing.
And if we look at the sobering reality presented in the text, the statistical research shows that more than 95% of all new startups fail. They go bankrupt.
95%, that's wild.
And the absolute number one reason for that massive systemic failure rate, it's not lack of funding or bad marketing.
What is it?
It is overwhelmingly that there was simply no market need for the product they created. They built something nobody wanted to buy.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here because we are fighting decades of cultural conditioning.
Go for it.
We are constantly fed this incredibly romantic, beloved narrative of do what you love and the money will naturally follow. It's the theme of every commencement speech. It's printed on inspirational coffee mugs everywhere.
It sells well on mugs.
Why is the source material so adamant about completely tearing down the specific, universally beloved guru speak? Isn't it a bit cynical to tell people their passion isn't enough?
It might feel cynical at first glance, but it is actually an act of professional self-preservation.
Self-preservation? How so?
It tears down this narrative because relying solely on passion is an incredibly high-risk strategy that almost invariably leads to severe burnout, emotional distress, and financial ruin.
Because you pour everything into it and get nothing back.
Exactly. Look, passion is excellent fuel. It is necessary. It provides the energy, the resilience, and the late-night stamina you need to push through the hard times.
But fuel needs an engine.
A strategic plan is the engine that actually directs that volatile fuel toward a productive destination. If there is no functional intersection between what you love doing internally and what a targeted external audience actually needs, wants, or is willing to pay to solve, you do not have a business.
You just have a hobby.
You do not have a personal brand. You just have a very public, very time-consuming, and highly unprofitable hobby.
That distinction is so clarifying. You must be known for something in a relevant space that is large enough to actually matter, building an audience that you can ultimately activate.
That is the formula.
You can't just be known for loving a niche topic if no one else shares that interest.
Precisely. It is about alignment. The text emphasizes that the sweet spot, the only place where digital equity actually compounds, is when you combine a topic or an idea that you genuinely love with an audience that has a desperate need for that information.
The intersection of passion and demand.
It is the precise intersection of your internal, authentic passion and external, verifiable market demand. You have to solve a problem for someone else.
So let's turn this into a reality check for anyone listening. Audit your current professional goals and the content you are creating.
Be brutally honest with yourself.
Take a hard, objective look at what you are putting out there into the digital world. Are you just broadcasting your personal passions into the void, talking to yourself, hoping someone magically cares?
If so, you are playing a losing game.
You need to verify with real data and real interactions that the content you are creating is actually solving a definable problem, answering a pressing question, or providing tangible value for a specific identifiable audience.
Because if you aren't helping them, they aren't going to help you build your equity.
And if you realize you need to pivot, or if you are sitting there realizing you need to build this strategic equity from absolute scratch, it brings us to perhaps the most compelling, the most raw, and the most universally applicable part of this entire introduction.
The starting point.
The question is, where do you start? What if you feel like you're at the absolute bottom? What if you don't have the resources, the mental bandwidth, or the perfect runway to launch this startup of you?
It's the most common fear people have.
This brings us to the final major concept, the ground zero start and the evolutionary process. And I have to admit, when I read this part of the source text, it stopped me in my tracks.
It's intense.
It gets strikingly, almost uncomfortably vulnerable here. The author completely strips away his own polish and reveals his deeply personal, devastating rock bottom during his transition from that high-flying corporate executive job to starting his own business.
He doesn't hold anything back.
He says he was suffering through the absolute darkest, most harrowing period of his entire life.
The level of transparency he offers is rare in business books. Usually, authors want to present themselves as infallible,
Right, like they had it all figured out from day one.
but the list of compounding, simultaneous tragedies he outlines is staggering. But it is absolutely vital to understand the severe depth of his starting point in order to truly appreciate the core, empowering message of his entire philosophy.
I really want to take our time here and read the specifics from the text because it completely obliterates any excuse you or I might have about not being in a good place to start right now.
It really does put things into perspective.
He writes that his wife, a woman who suffered from addiction and whom he had financially and emotionally supported through multiple stints in rehab, suddenly ran away with another man.
Just devastating.
She took his two young stepchildren, children whom he had raised, loved, and supported as his own. And because the law gives step-parents essentially no rights in that situation, he never saw those children again.
I can't even imagine that kind of grief.
He went through a brutal, emotionally devastating divorce, lost half of his entire net worth in the process, and yet, legally, he still had to pay her ongoing addiction recovery center bills.
It's an almost unimaginable level of emotional and financial betrayal and ruin.
But wait, there's more.
Right, the text reveals it wasn't just his personal and financial life collapsing, it was his physical health as well,
While dealing with all of that, he suffered a severe spinal cord injury.
on top of everything else.
The trauma was so bad, he was briefly paralyzed on the entire left side of his body. His doctors were legitimately questioning whether he would have long-term, permanent problems just walking normally again.
Terrifying.
He had to endure surgery to have a metal plate physically installed in his head. And as if the universe was just piling on, during this exact same dark time period, he lost 3 of his closest best friends.
3 friends.
2 died of sudden disease, and 1 died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He says, plainly in the text, that he started his process to become known in the digital world at emotional ground zero, perhaps below zero, if that's even possible.
When you pause and absorb the sheer weight of that devastation, what is truly profound about him sharing this intense vulnerability is how it functions as a masterclass in dismantling excuses.
It totally shuts down the "I don't have time" excuse.
It completely irrevocably demolishes the enduring myth of the perfect starting conditions. So often we look at successful, highly known individuals, the influencers, the thought leaders, the best-selling authors, and we subconsciously assume they must have had a perfect, frictionless runway.
We assume they were just lucky.
We assume they had absolute financial security, a totally stable, supportive personal life, or some kind of innate, untouchable genius.
But he proves that's not required.
The author is laying his life bare to prove, with empirical evidence, that you can start building your empire from a place of absolute, unmitigated devastation.
And crucially, the text points out that when he finally started clawing his way back, when he forced himself to sit down and start consulting, start blogging, start writing, he knew absolutely nothing about any of those fields.
He was a beginner.
He had never done it before. He says when he nervously hit publish on his first blog post, he knew nothing about the mechanics of blogging, SEO, or audience building.
He was learning on the fly.
When he sat down to write his first book, he had 0 experience in publishing. He wasn't relying on past expertise. He was stepping into the void.
This highlights the most critical democratic mechanism of the digital age. Becoming known is not a status you achieve overnight. It is a relentless evolutionary process.
It's an evolution.
It requires one specific mindset above all else, a mindset of continuous, urgent, humble learning. This connects back to the ultimate inclusivity of the internet that we discussed earlier.
How the internet doesn't care about your offline status.
Exactly. The digital algorithm is entirely blind to your personal suffering. The internet does not care what you look like. It doesn't care about your age. It doesn't check your bank balance. And it certainly doesn't care about the tragedies you've endured.
It just wants value.
It only cares about the value you offer today.
This is the realization that I think is the most liberating part of this entire deep dive. You categorically do not have to be an expert on day one.
Not at all.
I absolutely love that. The pressure is off. You just need the profound humility to learn urgently, to try, to fail, and to share that evolution publicly with your audience.
Lets them see the journey.
You do not have to wait until you have all the answers, the perfect website, or the flawless business plan to start participating in the digital space.
The text explicitly states this principle. You don't have to be an expert in something to ultimately succeed as long as you embrace a mindset of continuous and urgent learning.
We have it backward most of the time, don't we?
We really do. Expertise isn't the required prerequisite to begin the journey. Expertise is the inevitable outcome of engaging in the process consistently.
So if you are listening to this and you've been putting off launching that podcast, starting that newsletter, or putting your ideas out there because you feel like imposter syndrome is holding you back, this is your sign.
Just start.
Give yourself permission to be a beginner. Stop waiting for the mythical perfect moment or the illusion of perfect mastery.
The perfect moment doesn't exist.
Expertise is not the toll you pay to get on the highway. It is the destination you reach after driving miles and miles consistently, publicly over time.
If we pull back and look at the vast terrain we've covered in just this introduction, we can start to synthesize these paradigm-shifting ideas.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We've journeyed from the terrifying realization of the veil of silence, through the dismantling of offline power, past the dangers of passion without a plan, all the way to building the startup of you from absolute ground zero.
Okay, let's tag team this synthesis. Let's boil this down for our listeners.
Sounds good.
If we tie all these complex ideas together into one clear, sharp, memorable insight that truly represents the soul of this introductory chapter, what is it?
The core insight is the realization that the new equity of influence has completely fundamentally rewritten the rules of professional survival.
You read the rules.
Your authority, your relevance, and your ultimate future are no longer held captive in the hands of a faceless corporation, a traditional gatekeeper, or a legacy institution.
The cape is gone, and that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
Your professional power is now entirely in your own hands. It is not granted. It is forged.
Forged. I love that word for this.
And it is forged through the specific intersection of two things: your continuous, humble willingness to learn publicly, and the strategic, undeniable value you consistently deliver to a highly targeted audience that needs what you have to offer.
You are no longer Caesar from Embraer, dependent on a logo for respect.
You are just Caesar.
And in the modern digital age, if you strategically and consistently build your digital equity, being just Caesar can be infinitely more powerful and more than enough.
Now that we understand the incredible, democratized power of this new equity of influence, it raises the ultimate million-dollar question that we will tackle in our next deep dive.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Can anybody actually do this? Is this system truly open to everyone, or is becoming known still just a reality for a lucky, charismatic few?
As you ponder that question until next time, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the hidden dangers of losing your corporate identity. But what if the biggest, most silent risk in your entire career right now isn't failing at your current job, but rather succeeding brilliantly in a role where absolutely nobody outside your building even knows your name?
Oof. Let that sink in.
That's a scary thought.
If you're the best-kept secret in your industry, you are incredibly vulnerable. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time as we continue exploring exactly how to build and unleash your personal brand in the digital age. What if the biggest lie you've ever been told about your career is that you just need to, follow your passion?
Oh, I mean, it looks fantastic on a dorm room poster, right? Or one of those inspirational coffee mugs. But as a framework for building actual financial security or digital authority, it is a devastatingly flawed premise.
And yet, it is the default advice for almost everyone trying to carve out a space for themselves today. We're going to dismantle that idea entirely. The focus of our deep dive today is understanding why the traditional corporate ladder, like the one our parents relied on, has completely shattered.
Right, it's just gone.
Exactly. And we're going to look at how it's being replaced by what we're calling the equity of influence. If you're trying to build a business, launch an entrepreneurial venture, or honestly, simply make yourself irreplaceable in a chaotic job market, you need a blueprint to go from an absolute unknown to a trusted authority.
Yeah, and the core of that blueprint is discovering a sustainable interest that actually serves a very specific market need, rather than just blindly turning a weekend hobby into a stressful, failing hustle.
It's so true. And the shift we are analyzing here is just profound. We are transitioning away from a societal structure where massive centralized institutions bestowed authority upon you via a job title.
Right, the whole I am a vice president, so you have to listen to me dynamic.
Exactly. And we're moving into an ecosystem where you have to manufacture that authority yourself, node by node on the internet. Let's ground this in reality by looking at the structural shift from traditional power to this new equity of influence. Take someone like Mark Schaefer. His trajectory perfectly encapsulates this whiplash.
Oh, absolutely. By any traditional metric, this guy was a corporate titan. I
Yeah.
mean, he operated in the top 1% of a Fortune 100 company's organizational chart.
Wow.
Yeah. We are talking about an executive who held 7 distinct patents, possessed 2 master's degrees, and won the chairman's award twice.
And that's like the absolute highest stock award his corporation offered, right?
Yeah. Exactly. He managed a massive global team, took conference calls in multiple time zones, flew to Paris for meetings. Within the walls of his corporation, he commanded immense institutional gravity. He controlled scarce resources.
Because in a traditional corporate hierarchy, power is derived from access.
Yes, access to budget, access to executive relationships, and the literal framed degrees on the wall that act as gatekeeping credentials. When you hold those keys, people are compelled to return your phone calls.
But the moment he stepped outside that fortress to launch his own entrepreneurial consulting business, the gravity just disappeared. He describes his first day as an independent entrepreneur as facing the veil of silence.
The veil of silence, that is such a chilling phrase.
It really is. Because the phone didn't ring. His inbox was empty. All that institutional momentum evaporated in an instant. Inside the corporate walls, he was the center of the universe. But on the internet, as an independent entity, he was absolutely invisible.
And Cesar Paz experienced the exact same ego death. He was a leading digital innovator in Brazil, working for Embraer, the massive aerospace conglomerate.
Right. When he left to start his own venture, he articulated it brilliantly. He said he felt like he had lost his last name.
Oh, that's heavy.
Right. He was no longer Caesar from Embraer. He was just Caesar. The institutional armor was stripped away, and the wider market had zero context for who he was or the value he could provide. He had to construct his reputation from the ground up, relying entirely on his own output rather than a corporate letterhead.
Wait, if we pull back and look at the psychology of that, isn't that a deeply terrifying proposition?
I mean, it's horrifying.
Yeah, people spend decades navigating corporate politics, sacrificing their nights and weekends to secure those titles. It feels akin to playing a brutally complex video game for 20 years, finally reaching the boss level, and then somebody just unplugs the console.
And you lose all your data.
Exactly. You are forced to reboot the machine and start from zero, completely stripped of your saved progress. The terror is absolutely valid if you evaluate the situation using the old rules of engagement. But the mechanics of this shift actually democratize opportunity in a way that was historically impossible.
How so?
Well, think about how traditional power functions in the physical world. Your influence is heavily dictated by variables you have absolutely no control over. Sociological studies consistently demonstrate that your height, your conventional physical attractiveness, your socioeconomic background, the family you married into.
Or the prestige of the university you attended.
Exactly. All of that largely determines your upward mobility. It is a system entirely maintained by gatekeepers who look for physical and class-based signifiers.
But the internet is blind to all of those signifiers.
They're completely blind. The algorithms distributing content on YouTube or LinkedIn do not care if you are 5'2" or if you went to a community college. The only currency that dictates power in a digital ecosystem is the equity of influence, which fundamentally means the scale and depth of being known.
Let's clearly define what being known actually means mechanically, because I feel like the immediate cultural assumption is to equate that with being famous.
Oh, 100%. People hear influence and they picture red carpets, paparazzi, millions of passive followers, and viral dance videos.
Right. But fame is a byproduct of mass entertainment, whereas being known is a mechanism of targeted authority. They're entirely different sociological phenomena.
Yes. Being known means you have cultivated the precise reputation and audience necessary to execute your specific professional goals. Take Elisa Meredith, an independent marketing professional. She has zero desire for millions of followers.
She actually explicitly avoids fame, doesn't she?
She does. Her definition of being known is simply maintaining a digital footprint dense enough that when she emails a prospective client, they have already encountered her insights online. She is using content to pre-populate the trust required for a sales relationship.
And IBM utilizes this exact same psychological mechanism, don't they?
Yeah. They mandate their lead scientists to write public blogs. So when an IBM scientist walks into a boardroom to pitch a multi-million-dollar enterprise solution, the client has already spent hours reading their thoughts. The credibility precedes the physical meeting.
Okay, so the operating principle for you listening right now is that your static resume is actively depreciating in value while your dynamic digital footprint is appreciating. You have the leverage to bypass the gatekeepers entirely.
Exactly.
But And this is big, but if we accept that past credentials don't build digital authority, we have to look at what actually fuels this engine. The dominant narrative preached by internet gurus, and this brings us back to our opening thought, is that passion is the ultimate fuel. Just find your passion.
Which is an incredibly seductive concept because it appeals to our desire for self-actualization. It feels good to hear.
It does. Let's dissect the advice of someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, who has built an empire on this exact rhetoric. The conventional self-help mandate is to look deep inside yourself, isolate the single activity you want to do for the rest of your life, aggressively eliminate all other options, and just do that one thing.
You're told to ignore the market economics, ignore the audience metrics, and let the sheer force of your passion carry you to success.
But business coach Dana Sanchez exposes the structural flaw in this advice. She points out that a passion or a hobby is fundamentally a selfish endeavor. It exists to provide you with internal pleasure. A business, by definition, is an external utility.
Right, it exists to solve a market need.
Exactly. The whole field of dreams philosophy of build it and they will come is a mathematical failure in business.
And Cal Newport, the computer science professor at Georgetown University, has conducted extensive research on the specific friction between internal desire and market value.
Oh, his research is fascinating.
It really is. He found that the cognitive leap people make, assuming that because an activity brings them joy as a weekend hobby, it will bring them equal joy when monetized, is factually incorrect. The psychological dynamic completely inverts the moment your mortgage payment depends on that activity.
It stops being an escape.
Precisely. The hobby stops being an escape and becomes an obligation subjected to market pressures.
And the ultimate irony here is that Gary Vaynerchuk's actual documented career trajectory completely contradicts the advice he sells.
Oh, yeah. If you look at his youth, his authentic passions were the New York Jets and trading baseball cards.
Right. If he had strictly followed his own doctrine, he would have launched a baseball card blog in the early 2000s and likely evaporated into a saturated sea of identical hobbyists. He didn't build his media empire on his passion. He built it by identifying a highly viable market inefficiency.
He saw that his father's physical wine business could be exponentially scaled by using energetic, unpolished video content on early YouTube. He leveraged a market need, not a childhood fantasy.
And Mark Schaefer provides a brilliant personal audit of this concept too. If you ask him what his truest, deepest passion is, it's sitting on his boat, drifting in the middle of a serene, clear blue lake, reading a novel.
I mean, that sounds lovely.
It sounds great. He could technically launch a digital brand called Boats and Books, but who does that serve? Where is the market utility?
Nowhere.
Exactly. He also has a passion for hiking, but he self-corrects by admitting he only enjoys flat trails in perfectly mild weather, and he possesses zero technical knowledge about outdoor gear. The resulting content would be the middle-aged dude's guide to hiking, mostly flat trails in mild weather.
Which is funny, but it's not a business.
Right. I want to look at the mechanics of why that fails.
Yeah.
Let's use an analogy here. Think of building digital influence like building a car engine. Your passion is the spark plug. It provides an initial burst of ignition, a little bit of heat, but a spark in an empty room just flashes and dies. The market need, the audience's actual problem, is the engine block and the transmission. It captures the energy of that spark, contains it, and converts it into forward momentum. If you just follow your passion without a market need, you are holding a spark plug in your bare hand, wondering why you aren't moving forward.
That captures the causality perfectly. You are required to treat your personal brand with the exact same rigor as a venture-backed startup. The data is deeply sobering. 95% of all startups fail.
95%.
Yeah. And when economists analyze the postmortems of those failures, the primary killer is not lack of funding or poor team dynamics. It is the absence of a market need.
It built a product nobody wanted to buy.
Exactly. Relying solely on internal passion practically guarantees you will join that 95% failure rate. Passion is the requisite energy to get to the starting line, but it is incapable of carrying you to the finish line.
So the directive for you listening is to stop romanticizing your hobbies. You have to architect a logical strategy that marries something you enjoy with an audience whose problems you can actually solve.
Yes.
If self-centered passion is a dead end, the alternative framework we need to look at is finding your place.
And place is a very specific formula. It is a sustainable interest combined with the specific authority you want to be known for. The critical divergence between a passion and a sustainable interest is orientation. Passion looks inward. A sustainable interest looks outward.
It inherently connects to the well-being of other people.
Exactly. And it provides the creator with a deep sense of purpose. Mark found his sustainable interest in teaching digital marketing. It provided purpose because he could tangibly see it altering the economic trajectories of his students' lives.
Whereas sitting on his boat reading a novel provided zero purpose to anyone but himself.
Right. In the context of producing content for years on end, purpose is the only psychological mechanism powerful enough to prevent burnout.
The evolution of Betty Brennan's company, Taylor Studios, is a masterclass in shifting from a narrow product to a sustainable place. Her business was literally manufacturing physical museum displays. That was how she defined her market.
But that specific industry was contracting, wasn't it?
Oh, heavily. Budgets were tightening, competition was brutal, and growth had completely stagnated. If her place was permanently locked as making museum displays, her business was doomed. But she engaged in a semantic reframing of her core competency. She realized she wasn't building displays. She was executing physical storytelling.
Wow, physical storytelling. That cognitive shift radically expands her total addressable market. By redefining her sustainable interest from a niche commodity to a broader, highly valuable communication skill, she unlocked massive corporate sectors.
Suddenly, she wasn't just pitching museums. She was building immersive corporate history walls for Fortune 500 companies, massive university campuses, professional sports facilities.
And Tom Webster, who analyzes consumer behavior as a VP at Edison Research, frames this difference brilliantly. He argues the objective is not top-of-mind awareness. Top-of-mind awareness is just being loud. It's writing algorithmic clickbait-producing articles titled 5 Great Ways to Write 15 Lists of 10.
Right. You might generate temporary traffic, but you don't stand for anything.
Exactly. The actual objective is top-of-mind preference. That requires planting a flag in the ground. If you consistently stand for the rigorous, truthful interpretation of complex data, the market will specifically seek you out when they face that exact problem.
But hold on. If the rule is that we must strictly serve the market's problems to find our place, doesn't that inherently strip away our autonomy?
How do you mean?
Well, we tell people to leave soul-crushing corporate jobs to find freedom. But if you have to become a slave to whatever your Instagram followers demand you solve for them, aren't you just swapping a corporate boss for an algorithmic one? How is that not just becoming a drone all over again?
That is the central tension of the creator economy, and it's a vital pushback. The distinction lies in the intersection of aptitude and curiosity. You aren't subjugating yourself to random market demands. You are identifying the specific overlap between what the market desperately needs and what you find intellectually stimulating to solve.
Okay, so how do you find that overlap?
The answer to finding your place is usually hidden in the mundane interactions of your daily life. What are the specific recurring questions that your colleagues, clients, or friends constantly text you about? James Altucher conducted interviews with dozens of peak performers across wildly different industries, and he isolated one universal trait.
Which was?
They all possessed an obsessive desire to solve a specific problem for the many. Your sustainable interest is the problem you find endlessly fascinating to unpack.
Drew Houston, the founder of Dropbox, calls this finding your tennis ball.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you want to identify the problem that you are so intrinsically motivated to solve that you will chase it with the manic, singular focus of a dog chasing a tennis ball. It completely flips the conventional wisdom. We have to stop agonizing over the question, what am I passionate about? And start rigorously asking, what complex problem can I solve for other people that I won't get bored of exploring?
But identifying that problem introduces an immediate, often paralyzing psychological barrier.
Imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Once you know what you want to teach or solve, the imposter syndrome activates. The internal monologue immediately says, I do not have a PhD in this. I am not a recognized subject matter expert. I have no right to publish my thoughts on this.
It's the myth of innate talent, right? The idea that authority is something you must possess entirely before you are allowed to speak, rather than something you generate by speaking.
Precisely. The digital landscape does not require you to arrive as a fully formed expert. It only requires a posture of urgent, transparent, and continuous learning. A professional is frequently just an amateur who refused to quit when the initial results were terrible.
Let's look at the raw mechanics of Antonio Centino's story, because it completely obliterates the excuse of needing prior expertise. Antonio was an Iraq War Marine. He grew up in a trailer park in West Texas, completely divorced from any centers of wealth or fashion. When he transitioned into the civilian workforce, his marketable skills were practically non-existent. He couldn't even type on a keyboard properly.
Wait, he couldn't even type.
No. He landed a finance job and was fired within 3 months. He attempted to launch a custom suit business called a tailored suit, and he grinded at it for 4 agonizing years. The business was a failure. People were simply not buying his suits.
But he noticed a critical anomaly in his data, right?
Yeah, exactly.
While the physical product was failing, the digital architecture he built around it was generating friction. People were actively reading the rudimentary blog posts he was writing about the psychology of men's fashion.
And he was literally dictating those articles into voice-to-text software at 4 a.m. because of his inability to type.
That is incredible.
He analyzed that friction and realized his aptitude wasn't in retail logistics. It was in synthesizing and communicating the sociology of appearance. So he pivots. He launches a new platform, Real Men, Real Style.
And he analyzes the media landscape and identifies that video content, specifically on YouTube at that time, was vastly underutilized in his niche.
Yes. So you have a broke veteran with zero background in film production, no typing skills, and a failed retail business. His response is to publicly commit to producing 200 men's fashion tip videos in 200 consecutive days.
200 videos in 200 days.
Yes. He bootstrapped the entire operation for less than $2,000, which included buying his basic camera and lighting gear. He didn't wait to become an expert. He weaponized the learning process itself.
And the ultimate vindication is that he eventually generated enough revenue through this content to walk into a tailor and purchase the exact $3,000 custom suit he used to stare at when he was broke.
But let's analyze the physical toll of that commitment. Producing 200 videos in 200 days, especially when you have no technical proficiency, sounds like an absolute guarantee of creative and physical burnout. How does a human being sustain that volume without the quality degrading to the point of algorithmic punishment?
The sustainability came from his strategic definition of success. He intentionally lowered his bar for quality. He was not trying to engineer viral hits. He wasn't spending 40 hours heavily editing a masterpiece to hit a home run.
He aimed for singles and doubles.
Exactly. Rapid, functional, unpolished answers to specific questions. More importantly, he gave himself permission to be objectively terrible on camera in the beginning. If you go back and watch video number 3 out of the 200, it is incredibly stiff and poorly lit.
I can only imagine.
But the sheer volume of daily output forces a physiological and technical adaptation. You learn pacing, you learn lighting, you learn audience retention, simply because the rep count is so high.
There is also a massive psychological mechanism at play here regarding how audiences form attachments. We assume audiences want polished perfection, the guru speaking down from the mountaintop.
Right, the flawless expert.
Exactly. But documenting your messy, unpolished journey actually triggers a vulnerability loop. When an audience watches you struggle with the lighting, stumble over your words, and incrementally improve over 50 videos, it fosters a parasocial relationship that is significantly deeper than if you presented yourself as a flawless, untouchable expert. You aren't lecturing them, you are learning alongside them.
That shared vulnerability builds ironclad trust. The mandate is to stop waiting for permission from an invisible gatekeeper. Let the brutal, iterative process of consistent creation forge your expertise in public.
But Antonio didn't just survive because he was consistent. Consistency in a vacuum is just shouting into an empty canyon. If he had posted those 200 videos on a platform where his target demographic didn't exist, or where 10,000 other guys were making the exact same videos, he would still be broke. He succeeded because he found a specific vector for distribution. He found his space.
Space is the logistical counterpart to your place. It is defined as an uncontested or severely underoccupied niche that still possesses enough audience density to be economically viable. This is where tactical awareness supersedes sheer effort.
Because if you pour your heart into creating brilliant content, but you drop it into a space that is already hypersaturated with established titans, your signal will be entirely absorbed by their noise.
You have to locate the structural gaps in the market.
Joe Wicks is a phenomenal case study in exploiting a structural gap.
Oh, the fitness guy.
Yeah. Before he built his empire, he was a financially struggling personal trainer in London. His marketing strategy consisted of physically riding a bicycle from train station to train station, handing out flyers and taping up posters to convince people to attend his fitness boot camps.
That sounds exhausting.
It was a massive expenditure of physical energy for almost zero return. And the global fitness market is arguably one of the most brutally saturated industries on Earth. Millions of trainers are screaming for attention.
But Joe isolated a space by looking at the emerging architecture of social media, right?
Exactly. While other trainers were posting long, traditional workout blogs or hour-long YouTube routines, Joe looked at early Instagram and Snapchat. He realized there was a massive under 30 demographic there, and he exploited the platform's short video format. He started posting hyperkinetic 15-second recipe videos.
Let's dissect why those 15 seconds worked mechanically. The fitness industry historically demands massive cognitive and physical commitments from its audience. Read this 40-page meal plan. Do this 90-minute workout.
It's overwhelming.
Completely. But Joe asked for 15 seconds. It was a micro-commitment that seamlessly fit the scrolling behavior of his target demographic. He combined a sustainable interest in nutrition with an unsaturated structural niche.
Crucially, he also weaponized controversy to separate himself from the noise.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he didn't just offer recipes. He actively attacked the established diet industry. He publicly mocked low-calorie diets and commercial weight loss clubs, which polarize his audience.
And polarization creates fierce loyalty.
Exactly. That specific alchemy of short-form video, an untapped platform, and an adversarial stance turned a guy handing out flyers into an enterprise generating $1 million a month.
$1 million a month. That's wild. You see a similar exploitation of a structural gap with Lorraine Lutz.
Who is that?
She was a South African woman deeply unsatisfied with her corporate social media marketing job. She took a business course for artists and identified her place in the hyper-specific niche of miniature watercolor paintings. We are talking about canvases that are 10 by 10 centimeters, the size of a coaster.
Oh, wow. Tiny.
Yes. But her genius was pairing that with her space on Instagram. She launched a project committing to painting and posting one miniature painting every single day for 365 days.
So it's the exact same mechanism of vicious consistency that Antonio Centino used, but applied to visual art.
Exactly. And we saw this play out in the text economy with Robert Scoble. He transitioned from a quiet retail clerk in a camera store to one of the most feared and respected tech bloggers in Silicon Valley.
Right. And he didn't do it because he was a better writer than traditional journalists.
No, he did it because he recognized the structural power of the blog format before the major media conglomerates did. He occupied the space while it was still empty.
I think about finding your space through the physics of acoustic resonance.
Okay, unpack that.
If you walk into a crowded room where 500 people are all yelling at the exact same frequency, and you start yelling at that frequency too, your voice doesn't matter. The sound waves just collide and cancel each other out. You're exhausted, and no one hears you. The strategic move is to find the frequency, the platform, the format, the specific niche that no one else is broadcasting on. When you speak on an empty frequency, even a whisper resonates clearly across the room. You have to find where the interference isn't.
That is the perfect visualization of attention economics. The individuals who successfully build influence do not rely on lottery ticket virality. They execute a calculated formula: sustainable interest plus unsaturated niche plus relentless consistency.
And we really have to emphasize the sheer brutality of that consistency.
Yes. Lorraine Lukes painted her miniatures every single day. She painted when she was battling physical illness. She painted when she was actively grieving the death of a close family member.
That is intense.
It is. But that level of operational consistency is what bypasses the algorithm and speaks directly to human psychology. It proves to the audience that you are a reliable fixture in their lives, which earns their long-term attention.
So the actionable takeaway for you listening is to audit your distribution. Stop migrating to saturated platforms just to mimic what the dominant players are already doing. Think about Susie Trotta, a real estate agent.
Oh, her strategy is great.
It is. The default behavior for real estate agents is posting heavily filtered photos of property listings on Facebook, a completely saturated high interference frequency.
So what did she do?
She abandoned that and started posting unfiltered, hilarious photographs of the bizarre, creepy, and absurd objects people leave behind in houses on Instagram. She changed the format and changed the frequency and captured an entirely different audience.
You have to drive past the crowded front entrance and find the empty parking lot in the back.
Exactly. So the logistical mechanics are mapped out. Find your place, locate your space, and execute with consistency. But the moment we lay out this framework, the internal defense mechanisms of the listener will immediately activate.
Oh, of course. People listening are inherently going to look for the exemption clause.
Right. They will say, that's a brilliant strategy for a charismatic personal trainer in London, but I am inherently limited. I live in a culture that hates self-promotion. Or, I am way too old to pivot into digital media. Or, I am biologically hardwired as an introvert and the idea of broadcasting myself makes me physically ill. Let's systematically dismantle those barriers.
Well, those are legitimate sociological and neurobiological hurdles. Let's begin with the cultural architecture. In many societies, the concept of standing out is not just frowned upon, it is actively penalized.
Right.
Think about a concept like the tall poppy syndrome, which is prevalent in places like the Netherlands. In a field of poppies, the one that grows higher than the rest gets its head sliced off. In many corporate cultures and international societies, you are culturally and financially rewarded for blending into the aggregate. Standing out gets you, bopped on the nose.
But if we look at that pragmatically, if a listener is embedded in a traditional corporate hierarchy or a culture that actively punishes visibility, isn't taking this advice a massive, potentially career-ending risk? Why invite the friction?
Because the macroeconomic reality has shifted underneath them, whether their local culture acknowledges it or not. We're living in Thomas Friedman's flat world. The geographical and institutional moats that used to protect mediocre employees have evaporated.
So true.
You are no longer competing for a promotion against the 6 people on your floor. You are competing against a globalized, hyper-connected workforce. If you choose the perceived safety of remaining unknown, you are forced to rebuild your credibility from absolute zero every single time the market fluctuates, your company downsizes, or your industry pivots.
Being known, possessing your own equity of influence, is the only permanent, transferable asset you control.
Yes. Opting out of visibility to avoid cultural friction is effectively choosing long-term obsolescence.
Okay, what about the demographic barriers, the age exemptions? Let's look at youth first. Young professionals often assume they lack the gravity to be taken seriously, but let's look at Lindsay Kirchhoff. She was a 20-year-old recent college graduate who found herself locked out of the traditional job market.
Nobody would hire her.
Right. But instead of submitting to the black hole of online job applications, she leveraged the mechanics of inbound marketing.
We should probably define inbound marketing for the listener.
Good call.
Traditional outbound marketing is pushing your message into the void, cold calling, blasting resumes, interrupting people. Inbound marketing is creating a gravitational pull. You create content so highly specific and valuable that the exact people you want to work with are naturally pulled into your orbit.
Exactly. She utilized inbound marketing by treating her perceived weakness, her youth, as her primary asset. She started publishing articles on LinkedIn focused entirely on millennial marketing from the inside out.
I love that.
She titled it, How to Market to Me. She wasn't pretending to be a 50-year-old marketing executive with decades of data. She simply provided transparent, high-definition observations of her own demographics' consumer behavior.
And by broadcasting on that specific frequency, she bypassed the HR gatekeepers entirely.
Completely bypassed them. She ended up securing consulting contracts with massive legacy brands like Campbell's Soup and was featured as a subject matter expert in the LA Times, all at 20 years old. Her youth was the exact lens the market was desperate to look through.
And we see the exact inverse assumption regarding older demographics. People in their 50s and 60s often assume the digital creator economy is exclusively reserved for Gen Z and that they are too old to adapt.
But psychologist Angela Duckworth's landmark research on the concept of grit completely dismantles this.
It does. Grit is defined as the intersection of passion and sustained perseverance over long durations. Duckworth's data empirically demonstrates that grit heavily correlates with age.
So older generations actually have an advantage.
A structural psychological advantage in this space. They have been culturally conditioned to endure delayed gratification. They understand the mechanics of working diligently at a single pursuit for years before seeing a payout.
While younger generations, conditioned by algorithmic virality, frequently expect overnight monetization.
And they suffer massive burnout when it doesn't materialize in 3 months. If consistency is the ultimate differentiator in building influence, being older and possessing higher baseline grit is a massive competitive advantage.
Grit is the endurance engine that powers the whole system. Finally, let's address the personality barrier. Introversion. The assumption is that you must be an aggressively charismatic, extroverted performer to command attention.
But Mark Schaefer himself shatters this by analyzing his own neurobiology. He is a profound introvert. He finds large crowds physically draining and admits to experiencing acute anxiety every time he hits the publish button.
Really? That's surprising.
Yeah. The realization here is that building influence does not require a personality transplant. You do not have to adopt the persona of a hyper-caffeinated vlogger. The internet offers asynchronous communication tools perfectly suited for introverts.
So if live video drains you, leverage the quiet, methodical platform of a long-form text blog.
Exactly. If you hate crowds but enjoy deep intellectual banter, Launch an interview-based podcast where you control the environment. You adapt the architecture of the digital tools to accommodate your specific temperament, rather than warping your temperament to fit a trend.
The ultimate synthesis of everything we've unpacked today fundamentally redefines how we view modern success. Acquiring the equity of influence is not a mystical byproduct of algorithmic luck. It has nothing to do with engineering a fake, glamorous lifestyle to trick people into following you.
It is a profoundly deliberate, gritty, and mechanical process. You are taking the raw material of yourself and structuring it like a highly disciplined startup. You identify a sustainable interest that materially improves the lives of others, your place.
You locate a structural gap in the distribution network where your voice won't be drowned out by the noisier space.
And you weld those two components together with a level of unwavering daily consistency that most people simply do not have the stamina to maintain. It is the triumph of endurance over innate talent.
And understanding those macro mechanics is just the foundation. As when I push forward into the next phase of this framework, we're going to get highly tactical regarding how you actually map out the competitive landscape. How do you specifically analyze the digital noise to locate that one empty frequency where your voice will resonate the loudest?
That transition from theory to granular execution is where the actual influence is built.
We will dive deep into that execution next time. But before we go, we want to leave you with a diagnostic question to test your current standing in this new ecosystem. Think about the concept of the veil of silence.
Right.
If every institutional credential you rely on vanished tomorrow, and a stranger could only evaluate your worth based purely on the digital footprint you have left behind today, what would they think you stand for? And more importantly, is that what you actually want to be known for?
What if the reason you aren't standing out in your career or, your business isn't because you lack talent, but simply because you haven't found your tennis ball?
Oh, that is such a profound shift in perspective.
Right. Because we spend so much energy on the hustle.
Exactly. We spend a tremendous amount of cultural energy just trying to manufacture motivation out of thin air.
Yeah, the elaborate schedules and the productivity hacks.
Right. Assuming that if we just, push harder, we'll eventually break through the noise.
Yeah.
But the source material we're examining today suggests something entirely different.
It says we're looking in the wrong place.
Completely. It argues that what we actually need is to uncover a very specific type of obsession.
And that is exactly what we are dissecting in this deep dive. For you listening, we are taking that incredibly vague and honestly, usually unhelpful advice to just find your passion, and we are replacing it with a concrete, actionable blueprint.
Which is so needed.
It really is. We are going to explore the exact steps to discover your sustainable interest, which is basically this unique intersection where your innate skills meet the actual needs of others.
And we really need to emphasize the word sustainable there.
Oh, absolutely. Why is that distinction so critical for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship?
Well, because passion is an emotion.
Right.
And emotions are just inherently volatile.
They flare up and then they burn out.
Exactly. They fade.
Oh.
If you are building a brand or a definitive career path, you just cannot rely on a feeling, but a meticulously chosen sustainable interest that gives you structural stamina.
But an endurance to actually stick with it.
Right. It gives you the raw endurance to become a recognized, uncontested authority in your specific field.
So we're going to set a very practical tone for you today. We are walking you through 7 specific battle-tested exercises from Chapter 3 of our source material to help you uncover this unique place in the world.
And we have to start by looking inward.
Right, because you can't stand out if you don't actually know what makes you distinct in the first place.
Exactly. You have to audit your internal landscape before you even glance at the external market. Which brings us to the very first diagnostic tool, the only I exercise.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does the only I exercise actually work?
It's conceptually very simple. You just have to finish the sentence, only I.
That sounds simple, but I bet it's not.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
The goal is to isolate the highly specific, unreplicable value that you bring to the table.
So we're not talking about broad categories here.
No, not at all. It's not about saying only I am a great software engineer or only I know marketing.
Because that would be statistically impossible.
Right. There are thousands of great engineers. It's about identifying a very specific combination of variables. Like maybe it's your unique educational background layered over a specific geographic perspective combined with an unusual set of soft skills.
It's like finding your professional fingerprint.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Filling in a sentence that starts with only I. I mean, that feels incredibly daunting.
Oh, it triggers massive resistance.
Right. It feels almost arrogant. Most of us, normal professionals, we don't walk around assuming we are the absolute singular authority on anything.
We usually know exactly how many people are better than us.
Exactly. There's always someone with better funding or a fancier degree. Isn't asking someone to define their only I just a recipe for immediate imposter syndrome?
It absolutely is,
Oh,
which is why so many people skip this step. But that reaction is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we're measuring here.
how so?
It's not about arrogance, and it's not about claiming you are the undisputed global champion of a broad category. It's entirely about unique positioning.
Okay, positioning.
Yeah. The author Anne Handley has a great framework for this. She calls it finding your rich thing.
Your rich thing. What does that mean?
Well, Anne Handley is a very famous expert in content marketing and writing, right? But if she tried to say, only I am a great writer, that would be arrogant
Yeah.
and just false.
Yeah, there are millions of great writers out there.
Exactly. So her rich thing, her unique only I, isn't just the physical act of writing. It's rooted in her specific philosophy. For her, it's about clear, simple communication that fundamentally respects the audience.
So it's not the skill itself, it's how she approaches the skill.
Yes, she operates from this core belief that a reader's attention is a privilege, not a right. That philosophy is what makes her distinct.
Wow, okay. That make it feel much more accessible. It's claiming ownership of your approach, not claiming you're the best in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this incredible story in the source material that illustrates this perfectly. It's about a medical malpractice insurance consultant.
Oh, I remember this one. This story is wild.
It really is. So for years, this woman thought her professional identity, her only I, was simply reducing paperwork for doctors.
Which is a very functional nuts and bolts definition.
Right, it's what she physically did every day.
Yeah.
But that was an incredibly vulnerable position to be in.
Because the industry was changing.
Drastically. You had new regulations, the digitization of medical records. All of it was systematically wiping out the need for someone to manually reduce paperwork.
Her entire industry was evaporating overnight.
And that throws her into a complete existential crisis.
Yeah.
Because if your identity is tied to a dying task, your career dies with it.
That is terrifying.
It is. So she is forced to sit down and really do this only I exercise. She had to look past the functional mechanics of the paperwork and dig into her actual personal history.
And her personal history was pretty intense.
Very. When she was young, she had these profound, life-threatening medical conditions, and doctors literally saved her life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when she started unpacking that trauma and that gratitude, she realized her motivation had absolutely zero to do with insurance forms.
It wasn't about the paperwork at all.
Not even a little bit. Her true only I, her actual purpose, was helping doctors be doctors.
Helping doctors be doctors. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It completely reframed her reality. She untethered herself from a dying administrative task.
And that saved her business, didn't it?
It completely reinvented it. She started finding entirely new, modernized ways to remove administrative burdens so physicians could just focus on patient care.
Because she couldn't compete on just being the fastest paperwork processor anymore.
Right. A computer could do that. But she had an absolute monopoly on her personal motivation. No software and no competitor could replicate that genuine, lived experience that drove her dedication.
That is so powerful. It changes the work from just a commodity into this deeply held mission. But, let's ground this for you, the listener.
Good idea.
If you're sitting there right now with a notebook, staring at the words, only I, and your mind is just totally blank, how do you get past your own blind spots?
It's tough when you're just stuck in your own head.
It really is. And the source material has a very specific, almost counterintuitive piece of advice for this exact moment.
Which is,
Do not ask your friends for help.
oh yes, that is such a vital warning.
It feels wrong, though. Your friends are your support network. Why shouldn't you ask them?
Because friends have a massive handicap in this specific scenario. They are looking at you through the lens of your shared personal history.
So they see who you were, not necessarily who you are professionally.
Exactly. They know the version of you from 5 or 10 years ago. Plus, just basic human nature friends inherently want to protect your feelings.
Right. They're going to tell you what you want to hear.
They will. They cannot provide the cold, objective analysis you need to actually find a unique position in a competitive market.
So instead of your friends, the blueprint says you need to ask your coworkers.
Your coworkers, your employees, your recent clients.
Right. And you aren't just asking them like, hey, what am I good at?
No, you have to be much more forensic about it.
You have to look closely at the specific types of questions people consistently come to you for.
Yes, you have to audit their behavior around you.
Like if you are the person everyone always pulls into a quiet room to help diffuse some messy team conflict, that is a massive clue.
A huge data point. It means your only eye probably involves a really rare level of emotional intelligence.
Or if your colleagues are always asking you to look at their pitch decks before a big presentation.
Right. Then your distinct value is probably your ability to take really dense, complicated ideas and turn them into simple narratives.
Exactly. The favors people ask of you, those are the literal breadcrumbs leading you to your internal only eye.
That is such a great way to put it. But we have to recognize that having that internal clarity is just step one.
Right, it's just the foundation.
Because you can have this beautifully articulated, deeply profound only I, but if you try to take it into a market that is already completely saturated with giants doing the exact same thing,
You're just going to get crushed.
it will be completely ignored. So the next challenge is translating that internal identity into an external reality where it actually has room to breathe.
Which means we need to map the terrain. We have to visually understand exactly where everyone else is standing so we can figure out where we should stand.
And this is where the source material introduces the 2x2 matrix.
The 2x2 matrix sounds like a corporate buzzword, but it's actually incredibly practical.
It really is. It's a very simple visual exercise.
Yeah.
You literally just draw an X and a Y axis on a piece of paper.
Creating 4 distinct boxes.
Exactly, 4 quadrants. Then you identify the 2 most important factors that drive decision-making for your target audience.
The variables.
Right. You plot one on the X-axis, one on the Y-axis, and then you have to be brutally honest and map every single one of your competitors into those 4 boxes.
Let's make this super concrete for the listener, using the continuing education example from the text.
That's a perfect example.
So imagine you want to launch a business or a platform in the adult education space. First, we need our variables. Let's say the Y-axis is cost of classes.
Okay, so the top is really expensive, premium courses.
Right, and the bottom is budget-friendly or even free. Then, on the X-axis, we plot the age of students.
So the far left would be younger people, like in their 20s.
Exactly. And the far right would be established professionals in their 50s and 60s.
Okay, so we have our 4 boxes.
Now, the exercise requires you to actually look at the market. You take all the universities, the coding boot camps, the digital course creators, and you place them in the boxes based on their price and their audience.
And when you do this, something really fascinating happens visually.
You see the herd mentality.
You see massive clustering. In this specific example, practically the entire continuing education industry was clustered in the exact same box.
The bottom left quadrant.
The bottom left. Everyone was aggressively fighting to offer cheap or free education to young people in their 20s.
Why does that happen? Why do so many smart companies willingly jump into a dogfight in one tiny corner of the market?
It's the illusion of safety. Yeah, that bottom left quadrant represents proven demand. People see that 20-somethings want cheap courses, so they assume that's the only way to make money. It feels way less risky to fight for a tiny slice of a massive proven pie than to try something totally new.
But the economic reality of that crowded box is a nightmare, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrible. Your customer acquisition costs just skyrocket. You are outbidding 50 other companies for the exact same Google click.
And your profit margins just collapse.
Right, because when you're in a saturated box, the only way to stand out is to lower your prices even more. It becomes a total race to the bottom.
So the real magic of the 2x2 matrix isn't analyzing the cluster.
No, not at all.
The power is finding the completely empty box.
The void.
Right. And in this example, the empty box was the top right quadrant.
High-cost transformational education for people over 40.
Exactly. There was this huge demographic of older professionals with a lot of disposable income, and they were being totally ignored because the whole industry was obsessed with 20-somethings.
It's the visual representation of an uncontested market.
You know, it's like driving up to a really packed stadium for a concert.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. The main parking lot at the front is just absolute chaos.
Yeah.
Horns are honking, people are yelling, and you are fighting for inches of asphalt just to get a terrible spot near the back.
That's the bottom left quadrant.
Exactly. But if you could just pull out a drone camera, which is basically what the 2x2 matrix is, you fly it up, And you look around the back of the stadium,
And what do you see?
you see a completely empty VIP parking section. The gates are wide open, there's no one there, you don't have to fight anyone, you just calmly drive around to the back and park totally stress-free.
That is exactly what finding the empty quadrant feels like. You get pricing power. You aren't defending your margins every single day because there are literally no competitors to fight.
So the challenge for you listening is to actually do this. Identify the two biggest variables in your specific industry, draw the 4 boxes, ruthlessly map your competitors, and find that blank space.
But, and this is a big but, this raises a really critical question.
Uh-oh.
What's the catch?
The 2x2 matrix assumes that an empty box actually exists.
Right.
But what if you operate in an industry that is universally popular? Like, what if you map out sports media, or personal finance, or food blogging, and you realize there are absolutely no empty boxes left?
What happens when the VIP parking lot in the back is just as chaotic as the front?
Exactly. This happens all the time in the modern digital economy. When the existing space is completely full, you can't just forcefully wedge yourself in. You have to invent an entirely new space.
Okay, how do we do that?
The source material calls this the core values mashup.
The core values mashup. So we're forcing a collision here.
Precisely. It's about combinatory innovation. You take a massively crowded macro topic like food or sports, and you aggressively mash it up with a deeply held, highly unique personal characteristic or value.
Like a specific sense of humor or extreme frugality.
Yes, or a dedication to family or radical environmentalism. By smashing a generic, crowded topic together with a highly specific personal filter, you essentially shrink the competition pool to 0.
You birth a totally new subcategory.
And you own it completely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the story of John Briggs from the text.
Oh, the sports guy.
Yeah. Sports media is infinitely saturated, right? If John had just started a standard sports blog-like earnest commentary on Sunday's football game, he would be competing with ESPN, The Athletic, and literally millions of guys on Twitter.
The 2x2 matrix for sports has 0 empty boxes.
None. But John didn't do earnest analysis. He did a core values mashup. He took sports and mashed it up with his core personal value of irreverence.
He became the anti-fan.
The anti-fan. He realized that while millions of people were playing superfan, no one was serving the audience that found the self-seriousness of sports culture kind of ridiculous.
So what did he actually make?
Instead of analyzing game tape, he started making YouTube videos that just mercilessly mocked the most sacred symbols of these franchises, their logos.
Oh my God.
Yeah. In one video, he literally animated the Miami Dolphins logo being chopped up and served as sushi.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And it worked, didn't it?
He exploded to 200,000 views a week almost instantly.
And psychologically, it makes total sense why that worked. Reverence is the default setting in sports media. Everyone takes it so seriously.
So John was a massive pattern interrupt.
Exactly. He gave the audience permission to laugh at the thing they loved. He didn't try to steal ESPN's audience. He just paved a totally new lane right next to them, and he was the only car in it.
It's brilliant. And we see the exact same logic in the text with Fanny Slater. Food blogging is what the author calls a bajillion-person industry.
It's just a constant visual arms race.
Totally. If Fanny tried to compete by being another earnest, aesthetically perfect gourmet chef, the algorithm would have just swallowed her whole.
Because there's always someone with a better lighting setup and a fancier kitchen.
Exactly. So Fanny executed the mashup. She combined food with humor.
She completely abandoned the pretentious vibe.
She wasn't filming those moody, slow-motion shots of drizzling olive oil. She was cracking jokes while slapping together tuna melts.
She made cooking feel messy and approachable.
And hilarious. She didn't take herself seriously at all.
Which is so disarming for the viewer. High-end cooking content usually makes people feel totally inadequate.
Right, like you can't possibly do it right.
But Fanny's mashup actively lowered the stakes. It felt like you were just hanging out in the kitchen with a really funny friend.
And that specific emotional resonance, which was born entirely from that mashup, is what won her a Rachel Ray cookbook competition and eventually a show on the Food Network.
She won by being the most entertaining culinary personality, not necessarily the most technical chef.
So for you listening, the practical takeaway here is to look at your crowded industry and figure out what unexpected variable you can introduce.
The text gives some great theoretical examples of this.
Like DIY home projects. If that space is too crowded, you mash it up with environment and become the authority on zero-waste renovations.
Or you match it up with frugality and only do room makeovers for under $20.
Right. The takeaway is look at what everyone else is doing and be the Fruit Loop in the bowl of Cheerios.
I love that line.
Yeah.
But, mashing up core values sounds incredibly fun, but it introduces a massive psychological hurdle.
What's that?
It assumes you actually possess a high degree of self-awareness. What if you're sitting there realizing you don't actually know what your core values or natural strengths are?
Honestly, that's probably most people. We are notoriously bad narrators of our own lives.
We really are. We have a severe cognitive bias when it comes to evaluating our own baseline abilities.
Which is why the source material says you have to step outside of your own head. You need objective self-assessment.
Specifically, it points to the Gallup Strengths Finder test.
Over 14 million people have taken that. But, I mean, why do we need an algorithm to tell us what we are naturally good at? Shouldn't it be obvious to us?
Paradoxically, no. Our biggest strengths are usually the things that are completely invisible to us.
Invisible.
Yeah. Think about it. When you have a natural talent for something, it requires almost zero cognitive load for you to do it. It feels effortless.
So because it's easy for us, we assume it's easy for everyone.
Exactly. We falsely assume that true value only comes from things that feel painfully difficult. We systemically undervalue our own genius.
It's like a fish not knowing it's wet.
That is the perfect analogy.
The fish is surrounded by water. It's totally natural, so it doesn't even realize water is a thing. We are surrounded by our own competence.
Right. And tools like Strength Finder strip away that subjective bias. They force you to answer behavioral questions,
Right.
and then they give you objective data back about your actual cognitive patterns.
But let's look at Jane Hart from the text, because she is a great example of this.
Oh, the Workplace Learning Authority.
Yeah. Jane had this astonishing ability to consume massive amounts of really complex, chaotic digital information, filter out the noise, and instantly connect the dots to see the bigger picture.
But she didn't see that as a superpower.
Not at all. To her, that was just reading. It's just how her brain worked. She genuinely thought every professional in her industry was walking around seamlessly assimilating data like that.
It took an external intervention to break that curse of competence.
It did. A client literally had to sit her down and explicitly tell her that her ability to scan and curate information was a rare, highly valuable gift.
The client was paying her specifically because they could not do what she was doing effortlessly.
Exactly. And once she got that objective feedback, she completely changed her brand. She stopped trying to just be a standard consultant and positioned herself explicitly as a sense maker in a confusing digital world.
Which is such a massive relief of pressure when you think about it.
How do you mean?
To become fascinated, to become an authority, you don't actually have to invent a new persona. You don't have to force yourself to be something you're not.
You just have to become more of who you already are at your absolute best.
Exactly. But you have to use objective tools to figure out what that actually is.
Right. But, okay, strengths dictate how you work efficiently. They are your mechanical advantage.
True.
But we still have to figure out why you work. What is the psychological driver that keeps you going when things get hard?
Because talent without obsession is a trap.
It really is. If you just rely on talent, you'll quit the moment you hit sustained friction. And the market will always give you friction.
So to uncover that psychological engine, the source material introduces Warren Berger's concept of the beautiful questions.
The beautiful questions? There are 5 of these, right?
Yes. They are diagnostic questions designed to dig past surface-level motivation and locate your true sustainable interest.
Let's go through them. Question 1 comes from Dropbox founder Drew Houston.
And it cuts straight to the difference between motivation and obsession. He asks, what is your tennis ball?
It's such a strange, visceral image for a business context. What does the tennis ball mean?
Well, Houston observed that wildly successful people aren't usually driven by some generic desire to be an entrepreneur. They're completely obsessed with solving a highly specific problem.
Like a dog chasing a tennis ball.
Exactly. Have you ever seen a dog lock onto a tennis ball at the park?
Oh, yeah, they lose their minds.
Right. The dog isn't thinking about how tired it is or the mechanics of running. Its pupils dilate, and it's just pulled forward by this involuntary gravity.
So the question is, what problem pulls you with that same irrational force? What are you researching on a Saturday morning when literally no one is paying you to do it?
That's your tennis ball.
Yeah.
Because motivation requires discipline. You have to push yourself. But an obsession pulls you. You have to actively try to stop doing it.
That distinction is so clarifying. Okay, question 2 shifts the focus to your environment. The question is, When do you feel most alive?
But the author brings in the sociologist Martin Lindstrom here, which takes us in a really fascinating direction.
Right, because if you just ask someone when they feel most alive, they'll usually give some cliched, socially acceptable answer.
Oh, I feel most alive when I'm helping a team succeed.
Exactly. But Lindstrom ignores what people say and looks at how they construct their physical environment.
He says that every single house has one room that implicitly reveals what that person truly values.
It's the room where you drop the mask.
Yes, the room where you display your true self.
For one person, it might be a garage that is meticulously organized with specialized tools.
Or a reading nook just overflowing with historical biographies.
Lindstrom argues that your physical environment leaves forensic clues about your psychological priorities.
And he even extends this to our digital environments. He specifically points to Facebook cover photos or social media banners.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the image you choose to represent yourself at the top of your profile, whether it's a mountain range, a crowded city, or a quiet library, it reveals the environment where you feel most anchored.
We are constantly leaving evidence of our sustainable interest. We just rarely stop to analyze the crime scene.
Exactly, we just have to look at the clues.
Okay, moving to question 3. This one is from Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist, and it is famous.
The ultimate contrarian test.
What is something you believe that almost nobody agrees with?
This is probably the hardest question in the whole blueprint. Humans are evolutionarily wired for consensus.
Right. Disagreeing with the tribe literally causes us psychological distress.
It does. So when you hold a deeply convicted belief that runs counter to the accepted wisdom of your industry, that is a massive anomaly.
And why is that anomaly so valuable?
Because consensus is where the competition is the fiercest. If you build a business on a truth that everyone already agrees on, you are just walking up to a brick wall and banging your head against it alongside thousands of other people.
You're fighting for fractions of a percent of market share.
Exactly. But if you see an open door that everyone else genuinely believes is a solid wall, you bypass the competition entirely.
You establish a monopoly based on insight. So if you find yourself constantly frustrated by the standard operating procedures in your office, that frustration is a huge clue.
Yes, the friction of your disagreement is the spark for the new idea.
Okay, the last 2 beautiful questions pivot from reflection to execution. Question 4 is, what are you willing to try now?
Which is the perfect antidote to analysis paralysis.
Because you can sit around theorizing about your tennis ball for a decade.
But theoretical passion is totally untested. This question demands action. What low-stakes experiment can you launch this weekend to see if the reality matches the fantasy?
You have to generate real-world data. And then finally, question 5 is the legacy constraint. It asks you to define your sentence.
Like Abraham Lincoln.
Right. Lincoln had this incredibly complex, multifaceted life, but historically it condenses down to one sentence. I freed the slaves.
This exercise forces you to project to the very end of your career. Strip away the titles, the money, the daily tasks. What is the single immutable impact you want to leave behind?
If you can articulate that sentence, you have found the true north of your sustainable interest.
Absolutely.
So for you listening, your homework is to audit your life this week. Look at the one room in your home. Analyze the photos on your phone. Write down the industry conventions that secretly drive you crazy.
You don't need to invent a purpose out of thin air.
No, the data points are already surrounding you. You just have to connect them.
Now, we've spent all this time digging backward into our history and our psychology.
Right.
But a sustainable interest can't survive if it only lives in the past. We have to shift the orientation and project it forcefully into the future.
Time travel.
Exactly. The source material introduces a visualization exercise that acts as a cognitive bridge.
Okay, I want to actually walk the listener through this right now.
Oh, let's do it.
If you are listening to this while driving, please keep your eyes open. But for everyone else, I genuinely want you to close your eyes. Imagine the calendar has jumped exactly 2 years into the future. You have done all this hard, introspective work, and as a result, you are now a highly sought-after guest on a massive industry podcast. Imagine sitting backstage at a convention, listening to the crowd as you are introduced as the closing keynote speaker.
You're holding the first hardcover copy of your new book.
Yes. A book you got a massive advance to write because people are literally begging for your specific insights. Lock onto that future state. Now, answer this. What is the specific topic you are speaking and writing about?
The psychological power of this exercise is incredible. It utilizes something called temporal distancing.
How does that work?
When you ask people to declare their expertise today, their brains just flood with cortisol. The amygdala activates the fight or flight response because claiming expertise right now triggers massive imposter syndrome.
Right. You instantly think of all the books you haven't read.
You feel like a total fraud. But when you project the scenario 2 years out, you completely bypass the amygdala.
It relieves the immediate pressure.
Exactly. You are giving yourself a 24-month runway. You don't need to have the book written today. You don't need to give the keynote tomorrow.
It changes the goal from being the expert to becoming the expert.
That semantic shift is so liberating. It lets you admit your current ignorance while committing to a path of rigorous learning.
Right. If your 2-year vision is to speak on the ethical implications of AI in healthcare, you don't need to know everything today. You just need to commit to studying it for the next 730 days.
You just reverse engineer the authority. Your sustainable interest doesn't demand mastery on day one.
It just demands the stamina to start walking.
Beautifully said.
Okay, but I have to bring us crashing back down to reality here.
Uh-oh. Reality check.
Vision boards and daydreaming about keynotes, that's all super fun. But how do we know if the future we just visualize is actually supported by real stamina, or if it's just a fleeting fantasy?
We need a stress test.
Exactly. And the source material provides a brutal, highly effective diagnostic tool for this exact problem. The 35 headlines exercise.
This exercise separates the professionals from the hobbyists, absolutely.
So here is the mandate.
Yeah.
You take the theoretical topic of your future keynote, you sit down with a blank piece of paper, and you must write the first 35 specific headlines you would use for a blog, a podcast, or a video channel on that topic.
And the number is...
Not 10 ideas, not 20, exactly 35. So what does this actually achieve? Why 35?
It has a dual brilliance. First, it measures sheer, unadulterated sustainability.
The stamina test.
Yes. Building a personal brand or a business requires years of relentless content generation. You have to talk about this topic week after week without getting bored.
Or boring your audience.
Right. If you sit down to do this exercise and you completely run out of ideas at headline 12, you have just received a massive gift of data.
It tells you unequivocally that you do not have a sustainable interest.
You have a hobby. If your well runs dry after a dozen ideas, you will never survive the marathon of building authority.
It's a painful realization in the moment, but it saves you years of wasted effort.
Okay, but let's assume you push through. Let's talk about the second function of this test. The forced refinement of the idea.
This is where the cognitive friction comes in.
Exactly. So headlines 1 through 10, those are deceptively easy.
Because you just grab the low-hanging fruit.
Right. These are the broad, obvious, surface-level concepts that everyone else is already talking about.
Like, if your topic is leadership, headlines 1 through 10 are going to be generic stuff like the importance of empathy or how to communicate.
Exactly. Total generic garbage. Then, headlines 11 through 25 start to introduce real friction. The obvious ideas are gone, so your brain has to work harder.
You start looking at case studies or subgenres.
But then you hit the wall. Headlines 26 through 35.
The pain zone.
That is where the magic lives. By the time you hit headline 26, you have emptied your brain of every generic, borrowed thought. You are scraping the absolute bottom of the creative barrel.
To generate those final 10 headlines, you are forced to look at your subject from incredibly bizarre, hyper-specific angles.
You have to connect it to weird micro-trends or contrarian viewpoints.
Instead of how to communicate, headline 32 becomes something insane like, why introverted engineers make the best crisis negotiators during corporate mergers.
Yes, and the revelation is that very often, when people finish this grueling exercise, they look back at those final 10 intense headlines and realize those topics represent their true, completely unique place in the market.
The generic idea at headline 1 was just the Trojan horse to get their brain to the highly valuable idea waiting at headline 35.
It forces your ideas to evolve.
So grab a notebook today and subject your big idea to this crucible. Force yourself to hit 35. And if you can't, pivot immediately.
It is infinitely better to realize an idea is dead on a Tuesday afternoon with a piece of paper than 6 months and $10,000 later.
Now, as we're going through all these rigorous stress tests, the matrices, the mashups, the 35 headlines, I can actually hear the listeners panicking through the speakers.
Oh, the pressure is mounting.
People are thinking, what if I analyze my only I wrong? What if I pick the wrong core value mashup? What if my 35 headlines aren't perfect?
It's the paralyzing fear of getting it wrong.
Exactly. When we present a highly structured blueprint, the human reaction is to believe you must execute it with 100% flawless precision on day one or you've ruined your career.
But perfectionism is the ultimate enemy of the sustainable interest. The source material provides a vital pressure release valve here.
Yeah.
You have to internalize that your place is not carved into granite on day one.
It's not a static destination.
No, it's an evolving, living hypothesis.
We have to talk about Dory Clark here, because her story is the ultimate antidote to this perfectionism.
Oh, Dory's story is so liberating.
Her early career was the total opposite of a hyper-focused master plan. She was a wildly scattered generalist. She did journalism, political consulting, nonprofit PR, documentary films.
She could do everything, which meant she was known for nothing specific.
Right, she had no definitive place. And when she realized she needed to specialize, she faced that exact paralysis we just described.
She didn't know which of her dozens of interests to focus on.
But the key is, she didn't retreat. She didn't spend 3 years in a cabin refusing to speak until she had a flawless 10-year master plan.
She chose action over analysis.
She just started writing about what genuinely interested her in that exact moment. She pitched a piece to the Harvard Business Review. It was only her second post for them.
And it's short, right?
Just a 700-word article on a topic she'd been pondering. Reinventing your personal brand. She didn't declare it her life's work. She didn't launch a massive corporate rebrand.
It was just a 700-word experiment tossed into the digital ocean.
But the market reaction was instantaneous. It resonated so deeply that literary agents started calling her based solely on those 700 words.
That tiny, low-stakes experiment birthed her entire global speaking and book career.
The mechanism here is so profound, you absolutely have to let the market decide what is valuable. But the market can only give you feedback if you actually give it something to react to.
You cannot iterate a product that doesn't exist.
You cannot steer a parked car.
Exactly. The market is a reactive engine. It will eagerly tell you when you are right or wrong, but it remains totally silent if you offer it nothing.
So the ultimate takeaway from Dory's story is just start. Lower the stakes, publish the imperfect blog post, record the slightly awkward video, put your unpolished thoughts out there, and act like a scientist observing an experiment.
Action cures paralysis because action generates the data that perfectionism is waiting for.
Yes. So if we synthesize everything we've unpacked today, what is the overarching philosophy here?
The absolute soul of this deep dive is the realization that your unique, uncontested place in the world is not a magical artifact that you passively wait to discover.
It's not going to hit you like a lightning bolt.
No, it is an architecture that you systematically uncover, test, and build. You build the foundation through that uncomfortable internal self-examination, the only I exercise, and the strengths finder.
You build the walls by mapping the external reality with the 2x2 matrix and the core value mashups.
You stress test the roof with the 35 headlines. And ultimately, you breathe life into it by having the courage to step into the public square and let reality shape your ideas.
It is a deliberate, engineered process. So, to wrap this up, I want to leave you with the ultimate 4-part checklist for sustainable interest. You know you've found your true place when it hits these 4 marks. First, it aligns seamlessly with your natural strengths. Operating in this space gives you energy.
Second, it provides a deep sense of intrinsic purpose, usually by solving a problem for others, like the consultant helping doctors.
Third, it is visually and practically distinctive. You are the Fruit Loop in the bowl of Cheerios, occupying a space competitors are ignoring.
And fourth, it remains inexhaustibly fascinating to you. It is your tennis ball, giving you the irrational fuel to push through the friction.
It's a demanding checklist, which is why so few people actually achieve uncontested authority. But if you do the work, it's the only reliable blueprint. To you, the listener, thank you for investing your time and focus with us on this deep dive. We know this is heavy, complex work, but validating your unique professional identity is the single most important strategic step you will ever take.
Absolutely.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Now that you have the tools to define your highly unique place in the world, you face a totally new frontier. Having the message is only half the battle. Your next monumental step is carving out a completely uncontested space on the modern internet to actually broadcast that identity.
You have the play, now you need to build the theater.
Exactly. Claiming digital real estate is a massive challenge in itself, but we will leave that exciting, daunting frontier for your next exploration. Until then, keep doing the work, keep testing your ideas, and keep diving deep.
What if, following your passion is actually just terrible advice for building your personal brand?
Oh man, it sounds like corporate heresy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we are practically raised on this idea from the time we can watch cartoons.
Right, the whole do what you love thing.
Exactly. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's printed on coffee mugs. It's basically the core thesis of every inspirational graduation speech ever given.
Yeah, and it just floods our social media feeds. The cultural narrative is incredibly strong. Like, passion is this ultimate prerequisite for success.
It is, but it's fundamentally flawed in a lot of ways.
Because we are constantly fed this romanticized vision of the grind, right? But then you look around at the actual landscape of the creator economy or at small business owners, and you see this just massive epidemic of burnout.
Oh, totally.
You see incredibly passionate, talented people pouring their absolute souls into like a blog or a video series or a boutique business, and they just completely fail to find an audience.
Yeah, they're doing 80-hour weeks driven by pure passion.
Exactly. And it feels like they are just screaming into a void. It creates this intense cognitive dissonance where people think, I love this, I'm working hard, why isn't the market rewarding me?
Right.
But there is actually a logical, highly strategic alternative to blindly following a dream.
And that is exactly the paradigm shift we are exploring today. The whole objective of this deep dive is to dissect a really specific, incredibly pragmatic section of Mark W. Schaefer's book, Nay Own WN.
Right.
We're focusing entirely on Chapter 4, which spans pages 39 to 55. And the mission here is to distill his tested frameworks for discovering your unique place in the digital world.
So no more toxic positivity.
Exactly. We are moving past that vague, almost toxic positivity of just find your passion. Instead, we're going to walk you through 7 concrete strategic exercises to uncover exactly what you should be known for.
Which is huge.
Yeah, this is essentially the blueprint for anyone looking to stand out in business or entrepreneurship without, wasting years of effort on the wrong path.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that word passion is doing a lot of heavy lifting in our culture right now.
It really is.
If I'm sitting down to build a personal brand, or if I'm an entrepreneur trying to carve out a niche, why is relying on my passion considered a fatal flaw in this framework? I mean, it feels kind of counterintuitive to ignore the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning, right?
Well, to understand why it's a flaw, we really have to look at the mechanics of what a passion actually is. Because fundamentally, a passion is about you.
Okay.
It's an internal mechanism. It is an activity, a subject, or an interest that brings you, personally, pleasure, joy, or relaxation.
Right, so it's a hobby.
Exactly. It is a hobby. And society needs hobbies. I mean, we all need them. But a sustainable interest, which is the core concept Schaefer introduces here, is fundamentally different in its architecture.
How so?
Well, a sustainable interest connects your internal joy to the external well-being, problems, and needs of others.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it bridges the gap between your pleasure and actual market demand. It gives you a purpose. And it's that purpose, that reciprocal relationship with an audience where you provide value and they provide, feedback, capital, or attention. That's what actually sustains you.
Through the grueling years, yeah.
Exactly, through the unglamorous years of building a brand.
The source material actually offers this brilliant, slightly self-deprecating example from the author himself on this.
Yeah.
He openly admits that his true burning passion, the thing he loves doing more than absolutely anything else on earth, is just sitting on a boat in the middle of a clear blue lake reading a book.
Which, sounds lovely.
This sounds amazing.
And hypothetically, he could start a Boats and Books blog. Like, he could post highly curated aesthetic photos of himself getting sunburned while reading Hemingway or something.
Right, he could lean entirely into his passion.
But the unit economics of that and the daily reality of it just don't make sense for his actual goals. If he tried to do that every single day, year after year, as a full-time job.
The isolation would be brutal.
Totally. The isolation and the lack of external impact would probably drive him crazy. Not to mention, it wouldn't help him achieve any of his actual business objectives.
But teaching digital marketing, which is what he is globally known for, that is a sustainable interest.
Exact.
Because it utilizes his decades of hard-earned experience in global business, but more importantly, it's directed outward. He uses it to help others navigate complex problems.
Right. He sees the tangible impact of his work on other people's livelihoods. That outward impact is what provides the operational fuel to keep him going.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, passion without a plan is essentially just a hobby masquerading as a business strategy.
That's a great way to put it. Yes, having energy and charisma is wonderful for, your on-camera presence or your writing voice, but enthusiasm does not artificially manufacture market demand.
Right.
If you think about building a personal brand, you are essentially launching the startup of you. And if you look at the data on startup failures, the research is
I
staggering.
mean, the vast majority fail.
Right. They do. And the number one reason they fail, vastly outstripping things like lack of funding or bad marketing, is that there was simply no market need for the product.
Wow.
The founders were deeply, obsessively passionate about their software or their widget, but nobody in the real world actually wanted to buy it. And the exact same market physics apply to a personal brand.
I hear what you're saying about passion being inherently selfish or at least self-directed. But frankly, if I'm building a brand for, say, 5 years and I pick a topic based purely on cold, hard market demand, won't I just get incredibly bored and quit anyway?
That's a fair point.
Doesn't the passion act as the engine oil? Like, if I don't love it, won't the audience sense that lack of authenticity?
It's a very valid concern, and honestly, it's why the term is sustainable interest and not just, profitable chore.
Right, a profitable chore sounds miserable.
Exactly. You absolutely must have an intense interest in the subject matter. You must be relentlessly curious about it. But curiosity and interest are different from passion.
How do you differentiate them?
Well, passion implies an emotional peak, and emotional peaks are notoriously hard to sustain over a decade. Interest, on the other hand, implies a deep intellectual engagement that can evolve.
Okay, I can see that.
James Altucher, who is referenced in the broader context of this kind of work, noted that successful leaders and creators all share one defining trait. They want to solve a problem for the many.
Ah,
When you are solving a problem for a large group of people, the gratitude, the community, and the intellectual challenge of evolving your solutions, all of that provides a much more stable, long-lasting fuel than raw initial passion.
that distinction between the emotional peak of passion and the intellectual endurance of interest makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It really forces a complete audit of why you are doing what you're doing.
it does.
Like, are you launching a podcast or a consulting business just to hear yourself talk about something you like? Or does your interest provide a tangible, measurable benefit to a specific group of people?
Right.
A benefit that you can realistically sustain, research, and deliver for the next 5 years.
The time frame is the ultimate litmus test there. I mean, sitting on a boat reading is self-centered and, frankly, financially finite.
Unless you're a professional book reviewer, maybe.
Even then. But teaching digital marketing to help small businesses survive shifting algorithms, that is audience-centered and infinitely evolving.
So we establish this baseline. We need an outward-facing, sustainable interest. But how do we actually isolate what that is? Because the market doesn't care how unique you feel internally. You have to find a highly specific utility.
Exactly.
And that introduces the first major framework from the chapter, which is discovering your only I.
Yes, this framework leverages a concept from Anne Handley, who is a pioneer in digital marketing. She refers to it as finding your rich thing.
Your rich thing.
Yeah, it requires you to finish a very short, incredibly intimidating sentence, which is only I.
It's just 2 words, but like the cognitive load required to actually finish that sentence, honestly, is immense.
Because it forces you to strip away all the generic industry jargon. You can't just say, only I am a dedicated worker.
Everyone says
Yeah,
that.
it isolates the highly specific combination of skills, life experiences, failures, and empathetic traits that solely you can offer to the market.
It shifts the focus from the mechanics of what you do to the unique, unreplicable nature of how and why you do it.
Yes, based entirely on your distinct trajectory through life.
The source material illustrates this with a really profound case study about a medical paperwork consultant. Her entire business model was essentially dying overnight due to sweeping regulatory changes in healthcare.
Right, the highly specific paperwork she specialized in processing was basically being phased out or completely automated.
Yeah, she was looking at the total collapse of her brand and her livelihood.
So in a panic, she was forced to reevaluate her value proposition. When she sat down to define her only I, she couldn't just say, only I know how to fill out Form 8B because Form 8B was gone.
Form 8B is obsolete now.
Exactly. She had to dig deep into the psychological underpinnings of why she chose to work with doctors in the first place. And the underlying narrative for her was deeply emotional.
Yeah, the backstory here is wild.
It is. When she was a child, she suffered from these complicated, life-threatening medical conditions, and she survived solely because of the intense, dedicated care of the doctors who treated her.
Ow.
So as an adult working in the field, she realized she held this deep-seated anger that modern doctors are so suffocated by bureaucratic red tape and administrative burdens that they can no longer spend that kind of life-saving, dedicated time with their patients.
So her actual utility to the world, her only I,
Hmm.
was never about the mechanics of the paperwork itself.
Not at all.
Her only I was, I am the person who helps doctors be doctors.
Exactly. The paperwork was just the vehicle. Time reclamation was the actual value.
That's a massive shift.
It is.
Yeah.
That emotional structural realization completely reinvented her positioning in the market. It allowed her to pivot seamlessly.
Right, because if she's the person who helps doctors be doctors, there are a million ways to do that.
Exactly. She realized there were dozens of other administrative burdens, workflow inefficiencies, and staffing issues she could take off the plates of medical professionals to achieve her true mission.
And by abstracting her value from a specific task to a broader mission, didn't she end up having her most profitable year ever?
She did. It's a complete repositioning of her value chain. The paperwork was becoming a commoditized race to the bottom, but helping doctors be doctors is a premium, high-trust advisory role.
I love how this reframes the whole concept of a personal brand. It's not about just listing your skills on a LinkedIn profile. It's about understanding the underlying utility of those skills.
It requires an intense level of self-awareness, and one of the most interesting aspects of this framework is how it suggests you go about gathering the data to find your only I.
Because the methodology is highly counterintuitive, right?
The standard advice is always to just ask your friends and family what you're good at.
Which is usually terrible advice for business.
Oh, the worst.
Because friends and family view you through a personal lens, not an economic one. Plus, there's a natural Dunning-Kruger effect in reverse when it comes to our own skills.
Yes.
We tend to severely devalue the things that come naturally to us, assuming everyone else finds them easy too.
Yeah.
We really need an external mirror. But the text suggests avoiding friends and instead asking colleagues and clients.
Which can be scary.
Very. My immediate thought is if I go to my boss or a client and say, hey, what makes me unique? They're going to give me a totally sterilized corporate HR response.
Of course they are.
So how do you actually extract raw, honest data from a professional relationship without sounding insecure or like you're just fishing for compliments?
Well, you have to change the framing of the question. You don't ask, what am I good at?
Okay, what do you ask?
You ask about their friction points and why they chose you to solve them. You ask a client, when you were evaluating consultants for this project, what was the specific deciding factor that made you choose me over the larger agency?
Oh, that's good.
Or you ask a colleague, in the past 6 months, what is the specific type of problem you find yourself naturally wanting my eyes on?
So it's much more behavioral.
Exactly. And then you listen very carefully for the patterns in their answers. When people consistently come to you to untangle a highly specific type of knot, whether it's de-escalating angry clients or simplifying complex data into visual charts or spotting logistical flaws in a timeline, they are essentially handing you the raw materials of your only I.
So you're looking for the behavioral evidence of your value, not just their stated opinion. That is a massive distinction.
It's the only way to get real data.
But let's play this out. Let's say you've done the internal work. You've interviewed your clients, you've bypassed the corporate speak, and you've absolutely nailed down your only I. You have your unique trait.
Okay.
But what if you look out at the landscape and 10,000 other people claim to have the exact same unique trait? I mean, the market doesn't care how special you feel if the physical space is entirely saturated. How do you force a gap in the market where one currently doesn't exist?
Well, this is where we transition from internal self-discovery to external market strategy. You use a tool to visually map the competitive landscape, which brings us to the 2x2 matrix.
Right, the 2x2 matrix.
Yeah, it's a classic business school framework, but adapted here for personal branding. It's literally just a simple X and Y axis that creates 4 distinct quadrants.
Like a graph.
Exactly. The critical step is identifying the 2 most important variables or friction points for your specific target audience.
The book provides a very clean case study on this regarding the adult education market. Let's walk through that.
Sure.
So a consultant wanted to launch a platform providing self-improvement and education content. Their initial instinct was to target millennials.
Which everyone wanted to do at the time.
Right, but before they spent money building a website or recording courses, they mapped the market. They used the 2x2 matrix. They charted the age of the target student on one axis, ranging from early 20s to late 60s.
And on the other axis.
They charted the cost and depth of the classes, ranging from low cost quick-hit content to high-cost, immersive, transformational experiences.
And the visual output of that mapping exercise was startling for them. When they plotted every major competitor, influencer, and platform on that graph, they saw that the quadrant for millennial low-cost education was an absolute bloodbath.
Just totally packed.
It was entirely saturated with venture-backed platforms, free YouTube channels, and massive influencers.
A total red ocean. If they'd launched their brand into that specific quadrant, they would have had to spend millions on customer acquisition just to tread water.
Precisely. They would be competing on price and volume against entrenched incumbents, which is a losing game for a new personal brand.
Yeah.
However, when they looked at the top right of the graph, the quadrant dedicated to high-cost, deeply transformational education specifically tailored for people over 40, it was a ghost town.
Nobody was there.
Nobody owned that space.
And the consultant completely pivoted their entire business model and brand identity based on the existence of that one empty box.
Which is the power of the matrix.
But this brings up a massive fear that I think a lot of people have, and it relates to concepts like the blue ocean strategy. If you map out a market and you find an entirely empty quadrant, isn't it highly possible that the quadrant is empty because there is simply no market demand there?
Oh, the dead zone problem.
Yeah, like how do we differentiate between an uncontested, brilliant niche and a total dead zone where consumers just don't want to spend money?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the matrix itself doesn't answer the demand question.
It doesn't.
No, it only answers the supply question. It shows you where the competitors aren't. To validate demand, you have to look at macroeconomic trends and human psychology.
Okay, so take the adult education example.
Right. In that example, you ask yourself, is there a massive demographic of people over 40? Yes. Do people over 40 have higher disposable income than millennials? Generally, yes.
Good.
Do people in their 40s and 50s undergo massive life transitions, career pivots, and seek transformational education? Absolutely.
So the demand indicators are really strong.
Exactly. The demand indicators are strong, but the supply of targeted solutions is low. That is the hallmark of a viable empty quadrant.
As opposed to a genuinely bad idea.
Right. If, however, your empty quadrant was like high-cost education for toddlers taught via text message.
Right, which sounds absurd.
Common sense and developmental psychology tell you there is zero demand for that, regardless of how empty the space is.
So you use the matrix to find the gap in supply, and you use basic market logic to confirm the demand. That's a brilliant way to prevent yourself from beating your head against a wall in a crowded room.
It really is.
But this naturally leads to the most frustrating scenario imaginable for a creator or an entrepreneur. What happens if you draw your 2x2 matrix, you meticulously plot all your competitors, you check all the variables, and every single quadrant is packed?
Ah, total saturation.
Yeah. What if you are operating in a market that is fundamentally inescapably saturated? Things like fitness, food, travel, DIY crafts, or sports commentary. It means like millions of people are already doing it, and they have been doing it for a decade.
When the physical space of a market is completely full, you simply cannot compete on the existing variables. If you try to just be a better food blogger or a more accurate sports commentator, you will fail.
Because better is too subjective.
It's subjective, and it's incredibly expensive to prove. Instead, you have to create an entirely new axis. You do this through what Schaefer calls a core values mashup.
A core values mashup. Okay, explain that.
You take the highly crowded, saturated topic, and you aggressively combine it with one of your deeply held, seemingly unrelated core values to create a totally new hybrid niche.
The examples in the book for this are fantastic because they really show how psychological contrast creates a market moat. Take John Briggs.
Oh, the unfan.
Yes. He's a massive sports fan, specifically obsessed with the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a professional athlete, he wasn't a former coach, and he wasn't an insider. The sports commentary and fan blog market is arguably one of the most saturated spaces on the internet.
Every armchair quarterback has a podcast.
Exactly. But John noticed a behavioral quirk at a live football game. He saw a fan wearing a custom, highly insulting, hilarious t-shirt that was mocking the opposing team's mascot.
Right.
It was raw, it was funny, and it was deeply tribal. He realized that poking fun at the competition, the pure irreverence of fandom, is a massive part of sports culture. But very few people were owning that specific emotional space in a professional branded way.
Well, the major networks certainly couldn't do it.
Right. ESPN has to maintain a level of journalistic neutrality.
Mm.
So John mashed up the completely saturated topic of sports with his personal core value of irreverence.
It's a great
She
combination.
branded himself as the unfan. He started producing wildly popular sports parodies, mixing sharp comedy with deep sports rivalry.
Yeah.
He wasn't competing with analysts on who had the best stat breakdowns. He was competing on entertainment value.
And it worked.
Within months, he was pulling in hundreds of thousands of views because he created a category of one.
That is the perfect mashup. Another great example from the text is Fanny Slater.
Right, the food blogger.
Yeah. If sports is crowded, food blogging is practically impenetrable.
It's insane.
But she didn't have a serious culinary degree from Le Cordon Bleu, and she didn't have a $1 million test kitchen. So instead of trying to compete on the axis of culinary prestige, she mashed up food with her core value of humor and approachability.
So she leaned into the messiness of it.
Exactly. She made cooking funny, she embraced the mistakes, she didn't take the food or herself too seriously. That specific mashup provided such a stark contrast to the highly polished, intimidating perfection of traditional food media that she stood out immediately.
And didn't she end up on TV?
She did. That contrast eventually won her a national television contest hosted by Rachel Ray.
See, food and sports are obvious candidates for this because they naturally lend themselves to entertainment and personality. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. Try applying that exact same core value mashup to a heavily regulated, notoriously dry field.
Okay, let's do it.
Like, could you do this in corporate accounting, in insurance, in supply chain logistics?
Absolutely. And I would actually argue it is exponentially more effective in a dry industry because the cognitive dissonance is so sharp.
Oh, that makes sense.
The contrast acts as a massive pattern interrupt for the audience. Let's extrapolate on your accounting example.
Okay.
The standard axis for accounting is accuracy and professionalism. Every single accountant claims to be accurate and professional. It is totally saturated. But what if you mashed up accounting with the core value of extreme minimalism?
Oh, wow. What does that even look like?
Well, imagine an accountant whose entire brand is built around Zen-like simplicity. They don't use complex jargon. Their Instagram or YouTube channel features visually stunning, minimalist infographics that distill incredibly dense tax codes into calming, beautiful visual art.
That sounds incredibly soothing for a tax channel.
Right. Their office is sparse. Their onboarding process requires only 3 documents. They are selling the emotional relief of simplicity just as much as they are selling tax preparation.
They would instantly stand out in a sea of cluttered, anxiety-inducing financial firms.
Exactly. Or imagine mashing up accounting with radical transparency. An accountant who publicly breaks down the exact unit economics of their own firm to teach small business owners how cash flow works.
I can literally picture the minimalist accounting Instagram feed right now. It's a brilliant strategy because it drastically lowers your customer acquisition cost.
It does.
When you're the only person doing Zen accounting, you don't have to fight for SEO terms like best CPA near me. You own your own search term. As Fanny Slater put it in the source material, the goal of the mashup is to become the Fruit Loop in the bowl of Cheerios.
It's a perfect visual metaphor. I mean, the Cheerios are all identical, perfectly fine, and totally forgettable. The Fruit Loop demands attention simply by being fundamentally different in its composition.
But to execute a mashup, you have to actually know what your core values are. And that requires a shift from looking outward at the market to looking inward at your own psychology.
Yes, the internal audit.
Sometimes your sustainable interest isn't something you invent on a whiteboard. It's something that has been hiding in plain sight in your subconscious, waiting for you to recognize it. This leads us to a series of internal audits in the book: strengths, beautiful questions, and the tennis ball.
The first of these internal audits relies on the Gallup Strengths Finder test. It's a very common, relatively inexpensive online assessment used heavily in the corporate world.
Right.
The reason Schaefer includes it in a framework for personal branding is deeply philosophical. The premise of the Strengths Finder is that you should not waste your life trying to fix your weaknesses.
Instead of fixing weaknesses, what do?
You should double down on your innate strengths. You don't need to change your fundamental personality to stand out. You need to become the most extreme, optimized version of who you already are.
So if you are naturally a deep, empathetic listener, you shouldn't try to build a brand as a fast-talking, aggressive sales guru just because that's what is trending on TikTok right now.
Exactly. Are you a pattern recognizer? Are you an activator who loves starting projects? Are you a relator who builds deep one-on-one connections?
Once you know that, it changes everything.
It does, because when you identify your innate cognitive superpowers, you can architect your brand's format to leverage them. If you are a realtor, maybe long-form audio interviews are your medium. If you are an activator, maybe a rapid-fire daily newsletter is better. You align the brand with your biological and psychological realities, which drastically reduces the friction of creation.
Which pairs perfectly with the concept of beautiful questions developed by Warren Berger.
Yes.
These are specific, probing questions designed to bypass your logical, career-oriented brain and access your subconscious fascinations. My absolute favorite one comes from Drew Houston, the founder of Dropbox. He calls it the tennis ball concept.
It's a very visceral analogy.
It is. If you've ever watched a highly driven dog playing with a tennis ball, you know exactly what he means. The dog is completely obsessed. The pupils dilate, the body trembles with anticipation, and they will chase that ball into a briar patch, into a freezing lake, and they will keep retrieving it until they physically collapse from exhaustion.
They aren't doing it for a paycheck.
No. They are doing it because they are fundamentally wired to chase it. Houston's question to humans is, what is the problem, the topic, or the puzzle that you obsess over, like a dog chasing a tennis ball? What is the thing that pulls your attention so strongly that you can't stop trying to solve it, even on the weekends?
It's a thing you read about when you're supposed to be working.
Exactly. And there's another beautiful, highly psychological question in this section from Martin Lindstrom. He studies consumer behavior. And he points out that human beings constantly project their internal values into their external physical spaces, usually without realizing it.
Right, the environment audit.
He suggests doing an audit of your own environment. Look at the one room in your house that you curate the most meticulously, the room that you spend the most money and time decorating. Or, if that's not applicable, look at your digital environment. Look at the background image on your phone or your Facebook cover photo.
What are you looking for, specifically?
What place of peace, what activity, or what aesthetic is pictured there? Lindstrom argues that is a massive subconscious clue to what actually makes you feel alive and grounded.
It's a profound observation about human nature, really. We objectify our aspirations.
Yes.
If your most curated space is a highly organized, minimalist desk with 3 specific books on architecture, that tells a very different story about your sustainable interests than someone whose most curated space is a chaotic, vibrant kitchen full of exotic spices and half-finished recipes. You have to learn to read your own physical clues.
And then there's the intellectual pressure test posed by Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist.
Whoa, this is a tough one.
He famously asks founders, what is a deeply held truth that you believe that almost nobody else agrees with?
That is perhaps the most difficult question in the entire framework to answer, honestly. Most people default to a pseudo-contrarian opinion, like, I believe hard work is important.
Which everyone actually agrees with.
Exactly. A true Thiel question requires you to hold a position that genuinely alienates a majority of the status quo.
Why is that so crucial for a personal brand, though?
Because it accomplishes 2 massive strategic goals simultaneously. First, if you hold a belief that's strongly against the grain, it proves you have a deep, intrinsic, intellectual interest in the subject. You care enough to fight for it.
Right.
Second, and more importantly for business, it is the ultimate indicator of an uncontested market space. If you see a structural inefficiency or a solution that the entire incumbent industry disagrees with and you turn out to be right, you have just discovered a massive blue ocean. You avoid the crowded room entirely because everyone else is looking in the wrong direction.
Okay, so let's synthesize where we are. We've done the internal audits. We've looked at our curated rooms. We found our tennis ball. We've developed a contrarian thesis. We mapped the market with a 2x2 matrix. And maybe we even mashed up some core values.
We have a lot of data.
At this point, the listener probably has a whiteboard full of amazing, highly specific ideas. They buy the domain name. They design a slick logo on Canva. And they are riding a massive wave of day one enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, the launch high.
But the brutal reality of the creator economy is that enthusiasm has a half-life of about 3 weeks. 6 months later, the domain is expiring, they haven't published anything in a month, and the brand is effectively dead. How do we prevent this? How do you know if your meticulously crafted idea can actually survive the psychological grind of continuous content creation?
You have to stress test it before you build it. You have to force yourself to experience the friction of year 2 on day 1.
Which sounds painful.
It is, but it brings us to the final exercises in this chapter, which serve as the ultimate reality checks. The first is a visualization exercise. You project yourself 2 years into the future. Imagine your brand has been wildly successful.
Right.
You are sitting down to be interviewed on the most popular, massive podcast in your industry. The microphones are hot. What exactly is the host asking you about? What specific nuance, what framework, or what transformation are they desperate to extract from your brain?
That visualization is powerful because it forces you out of the launch mindset, which is all about logos and websites, and into the maintenance and legacy mindset. It forces you to define the actual substance of your expertise.
Exactly.
But the next exercise is where the rubber truly meets the road. It is arguably the most demanding, frustrating, and necessary task in the entire book, the 35 headlines test.
Yes. If you do nothing else from this deep dive, do this.
Really, it's that important.
It is. Once you think you have identified your niche, your sustainable interest, you sit down at a desk with a blank sheet of paper. You are not allowed to leave the desk until you have written down the first 35 specific headlines, article titles, or podcast episodes for your new brand.
The psychology of this exercise, the actual cognitive depletion curve you experience while doing it, is fascinating. Let's walk through what actually happens when you try this.
Okay.
Say I am building that Zen accounting brand. Headlines 1 through 10, they flow like water. 3 ways to declutter your taxes. The minimalist guide to deductions. You are full of dopamine, the ideas are fresh, and you feel like a genius.
But then you hit the second tranche.
Yeah.
Headlines 11 through 20. The low-hanging fruit is gone. You can no longer rely on derivative, surface-level tropes. You actually have to start thinking strategically. You have to stretch the core concept into new territories.
You start writing things like how minimalist architecture can inform your cash flow statements.
Mhm.
It takes more effort, but you get there. But then you hit headline 25. Yes, the wall. You are staring down the barrel of the last 10 headlines to reach 35. And the cognitive well is completely dry. You are forced to dig into the deep foundational bedrock of your knowledge and creativity.
And this raises an important question, right? It is the exact question the exercise is designed to force you to answer.
Which is?
If you cannot even come up with 35 theoretical ideas while sitting comfortably at your desk on day one, when your enthusiasm is at its absolute unbridled peak, how on earth are you going to sustain this topic for 5 years?
Sobering thought.
How will you generate the energy to research, write, record, and publish content week in and week out when you have the flu, when your kids are sick, or when a video totally flops?
It is the ultimate diagnostic tool to separate a fleeting, self-centered passion from a deep, sustainable interest. If you tap out at 15 headlines, the data is telling you something crucial.
What's it telling you?
It means your niche is either way too narrow to support a long-term brand, or, more likely, you honestly just aren't interested enough in the nuances of the topic to sustain it. But there is a massive secondary benefit to pushing through the pain of this exercise. If you do make it to 35, look at the delta between headline number 1 and headline number 35.
Oh, the evolution of the ideas on that piece of paper is where the magic happens. Because you are forced to bypass the cliches to reach 35, the topic naturally refines itself.
It forces nuance.
Exactly. The true, unique nuance of your perspective emerges under the pressure of cognitive depletion. By headline 35, you might realize that your initial broad topic has narrowed into a much sharper, highly distinct angle that you wouldn't have discovered for a year otherwise.
So this is a non-negotiable step. Sit down and write the 35 titles. Do not skip it. It will save you thousands of hours of wasted effort if you realize at headline 12 that you literally have nothing left to say to the world.
It is a brilliant safeguard, but as with all robust frameworks, it introduces a dangerous psychological trap.
What's the track?
Well, after listening to us unpack all of this, finding your only eye, bypassing corporate speak to interview colleagues, charting blue oceans on a 2x2 matrix, forcing cognitive dissonance through core value mashups, and surviving the 35 headline gauntlet, it is incredibly easy to fall into a state of severe analysis paralysis.
Absolutely. A listener right now might be sitting there feeling completely overwhelmed, thinking, I can't publish a single blog post or record a single video until I have achieved mathematical perfection on all 7 of these exercises. They want guarantees before they take a risk.
Which is why Schaefer concludes this deeply analytical chapter with a massive essential caveat, the just start principle.
The just start principle.
Yes, the frameworks are tools for aiming, but they are not excuses for stalling. You cannot obsess over getting your brand architecture 100% perfect in a vacuum on day one. Your specific place in the world, the true nature of your sustainable interest, will only evolve once it makes contact with reality. You have to let the market decide.
There is a fantastic narrative in the text about Dorie Clark that illustrates the mechanics of this perfectly.
Oh, I love her story.
Before she became a massive name in the business world, she was essentially a high-end generalist. She was doing PR, she was consulting on marketing, she was directing nonprofits, she was even doing documentary filmmaking. She was intellectually scattered.
Very capable, but scattered.
Right. She knew she needed to specialize. She desperately wanted to find a specific niche to be known for, but she couldn't cognitively isolate it just by thinking about it.
If she had locked herself in a room and waited for a lightning bolt of inspiration to deliver the perfect whisk-free niche, she would probably still be a generalist today. Instead, she utilized the core mechanic of agile development. She shipped a minimum viable product. She just started writing and testing her hypotheses in public.
Exactly. She wrote a piece for the Harvard Business Review. It wasn't a magnum opus. It was just a 700-word blog post.
Very low stakes.
Yeah. It was only her second time writing for them, and the topic happened to be about reinventing your personal brand. She chose that topic simply because she had changed careers so many times herself. It was an educated guess based on her life experience.
But when that single post hit the market, the feedback loop was instantaneous. The post caught fire. It resonated on a deep structural level with an audience of professionals who were quietly desperate for that exact guidance.
And the market responded immediately.
They did. The editors immediately recognized the demand and asked her to expand the concept into a massive feature for the print magazine. Within a week of that publication, high-level literary agents were calling her. She eventually wrote a definitive book on the subject and became a highly paid global expert on personal and professional reinvention.
Wow.
The critical takeaway is that she found her sustainable interest not by perfecting a matrix, but by putting work into the world and closely monitoring how the market reacted to the friction.
So wait, I have to push back on this because it feels like a contradiction. We just spent 50 minutes outlining highly specific, rigorous analytical frameworks. Are you saying we should just ignore all that, throw spaghetti at the wall, and just see what sticks?
Not at all. Throwing spaghetti blindly is chaos. It's what leads to burnout. You use the 7 exercises we just discussed to aim at the wall.
Okay, so it's about aiming.
Yes. You use the 2x2 matrix to find the empty space. You use the core values mashup to formulate the spaghetti, and you use the 35 headlines to make sure you have enough pasta to last the year. But you do not hold on to the bowl forever, standing in the kitchen waiting for the perfect barometric pressure and the optimal wind conditions to make the throw. You aim with the frameworks and then you throw.
Because the journey to becoming known is an evolutionary, iterative process. You are never, ever 100% competent or perfectly positioned on the day you start.
You cannot be. True market mastery comes from iteration. It comes from the continuous feedback loop of real human beings telling you what resonates, what confuses them, and what they want more of.
The friction of the market shapes the brand.
Precisely. Momentum is vastly more important than perfection in the genesis phase of a personal brand.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at the totality of what we've unpacked today, from dismantling the toxic myth of following your passion, to extracting your only eye from hesitant colleagues, mapping out the blue ocean, surviving the psychological wall of the 35 headlines, and finally embracing the messy reality of the just start principle. How do we tie all this cognitive heavy lifting together into a single cohesive philosophy?
The soul of this chapter, the core architectural insight you need to build your foundation on, is this. You do not need to be a preordained, natural-born expert to build a dominant personal brand.
You don't need a magical destiny.
Exactly, or a completely unprecedented invention. You simply need to do the rigorous work of finding a sustainable interest, that highly specific intersection where your intrinsic skills and curiosities meet a validated external market need. Once you find that intersection, your only job is to continuously learn in public. You consistently create tangible value for others, day after day, week after week, adapting to their feedback until your sheer endurance outlasts the competition. Remember, a professional is simply an amateur who didn't quit.
A professional is simply an amateur who didn't quit.
I love that framing.
Yeah.
It strips away the paralyzing need to be perfect and replaces it with the highly achievable goal of being persistent and observant. You aim carefully, you start walking, and you adjust your course based on the terrain.
Exactly.
But here is the reality check. Now that you have the frameworks, the matrix, and the headlines to figure out exactly what you want to be known for, you face a secondary, arguably much more dangerous obstacle.
You do.
Yeah.
Because having a great idea is only 10% of the battle.
You face the very real danger of launching your perfectly crafted, sustainable interest into a noisy, chaotic void where absolutely no one can hear you. You can have the best only eye in the world, but if the architecture of your distribution is flawed, you will still fail.
It's the distribution trap. Right. So next time, we are going to explore the mechanics of distribution. We will look at how to take this newly discovered sustainable interest and, as the old baseball adage goes, hit 'em where they ain't.
I'm looking forward to that one.
We'll dive deep into the strategies for finding an uncontested, highly leveraged space on the internet so that your voice and your brand becomes structurally impossible to ignore. Until then, clear off your desk, grab a pen, start grinding through your 35 headlines, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.